back in regular session. Let's begin with citizen concerns. Matthew Murphy is our facilitator this evening. Matthew calls on people in order of when hands go up. Each speaker will have a maximum of 3 minutes. Matt, are there any people with hands raised for citizen concerns?
There is one currently from Charlie Cadlick.
Sure.
Charlie, you should be able to speak.
Hi, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, Charlie.
I would like to make some comments, and I have some questions on your item 8 later in the agenda. I just want to make sure I'll be able to do it at that time.
Yes, you will.
Thank you.
Matt, is there anyone else?
There are no other hands up.
Okay. So,
Excuse me, Mr. Chair, one hand did just go up. Would you like to take it?
please, yes.
Okay, we're going to hear from our call-in user. Please let us know who you are and where you're from.
Hi, this is Karen from West Acton. Can you hear me?
You bet.
Yes, so I'm hoping to speak during the Kmart Property Owner discussion time and wondering if you'll allow people to speak then or whether I should talk now.
No, we will be hearing an update from Dean. Then we'll be taking board comments and then open it up to citizen comments.
Great, thanks so much.
For sure. Okay, so for the chair's update, our next meeting will be 2 weeks from tonight on Monday, June 7. That would be the last scheduled meeting before annual town meeting 2 weeks later. And just a reminder, we have the 67 Powder Mill special permit hearing to resume. It's been continued a number of times. I'm hoping we can get it in, since it was this board that heard the the better part of the presentation. Troop 32, Acton Boy Scout Troop 32, has not let the pandemic go to waste. They have 7 Eagle Scout finalists. Dean was at an Eagle Scout Court of Honor yesterday and at the Nara Pavilion, and it was a very good and upbeat crowd. I will be doing a double header for Troop 32 next Monday afternoon. Jim, I spoke to you about doing a Troop 32 Eagle on it would be Friday evening, June 11th, from 6 p.m. to 8:30 p.m. Can we count on you?
Yes, that'd be great.
Thank you. And David, they got in touch with another. Those are two Eagles. We got word the other day that they have 2 more Eagles, and they have a Court of Honor scheduled for Sunday, June 6th, from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. Would you be interested in representing us?
Muted.
Muted.
I think I can do that, but if I could confirm with you after.
Please get back to that. That would be fine. Okay. So that's my report. John is attending a select board meeting in Concord where they're dealing with the regional dispatch agreement. So he is not here now. We'll have to catch up with him in a little bit. So let's go into member minutes. Jim?
Let's see. None of my committees have anything, although I do have, happy to announce that there's going to be as in most years, the League of Women Voters is having a forum for the select board candidates That'll be Thursday, May 27th, just in a couple of days. It'll be via Zoom, and it's going to be in the evening at 7 p.m., and you can get all the information. If you just search for League of Women Voters of Acton area, you'll find either their Facebook page or their main website, and in both places, there's all the details about, how to Zoom in.
Okay, very good. John's here, so let's do the rest of member minutes, and then we'll go back to the manager's update and then the COVID-19. Joan?
All set.
All set. David?
And nothing from me, John.
Okay, Dean?
All I've got is, and it's actually quite important, we have a Memorial Day observance, which will be next Monday, starting at just a little bit past 11 a.m., and that will be at Woodlawn Cemetery. It's a scaled-down version. Just because of the dynamic situation with COVID, they were not able to schedule a parade or anything, but there will be some folks there from the high school, some musicians. I'll be reading the names. We do have a speaker, a veteran from Acton, who will be speaking, and there'll be some other events. So it's certainly significant, and the cemeteries always look good for this time of year, and hopefully we'll get some members to come down and pay their respects to the veterans.
We'll be there. You'll be, in addition to reading, do you have remarks to give?
Absolutely.
Thank you. Okay, we worked that
Got a
out.
mic in
Good.
front of me, that's it.
Okay. John, you're still standing.
Thank you. Yes, I've been in another meeting. Thanks for waiting for me. Yeah, in terms of operations updates, a lot of them are related to COVID, and I look forward to speaking with you about that momentarily. Memorial Day, I was already mentioned. So I'm ready to join the rest of the meeting. Thank you.
Okay. So let's have your COVID-19 response update.
Thank you. So we're in a good place as a community in terms of current infection rates. We have 2 current active cases, which is the lowest it's been for a long time. All the vaccine efforts have really been successful, and we did everything we're supposed to do in terms of keeping each other safe. So I appreciate everyone's work out there in the community. I know it was a long year plus, but we really appreciate what everybody did to keep this community safe. Now, of course, within the organization, we had many staff and volunteers that did tremendous work, but also out there in the community, people making sacrifices for each other. So it was nice to see. A lot of things are changing in the next 4 weeks. At your meeting on June 7th, it's the same night that the Board of Health will be meeting, and both of those meetings, we're going to be asking each board to consider its local declaration of emergency that was declared early on, and ask you to make a decision on how to handle that. As announced, the governor will be ending the statewide state of emergency on June 15th, and so we'll have a recommendation that night for your consideration. Other things are really ramping up across the buildings. We're preparing for, not having as many restrictions in place and being able to accommodate more programming and activities that we were more accustomed to. We'll have some announcements in the coming days about the library, and look for some announcements next week, or probably after Memorial Day, about the senior center. And things are opening up. A big thing that keeps coming up is public meetings and public hearings. We understand that there's work going on right now at the state level to try to extend some of the provisions that were created to allow for remote participation and other things that we've been able to do during this state of emergency. That work is ongoing right now. I don't have an answer on what's going to happen with that, and I don't expect one probably until early June. So we're planning. We've been advised to start advertising any meetings that are out this summer. If we're scheduling now, to schedule them as in person, and we will make adjustments as necessary. Of course, pending the board's decision on June 7th. But we need to be prepared in both scenarios. So hopefully some more clarity will happen with that over the next week and a half, and we'll look forward to a more productive discussion with this board on that next June meeting.
So we could count on a series of recommendations on June 7th for how to lift the local declaration of emergency and going forward.
Yes.
That's great. Well done, David.
My understanding is that for some things, like the fact that the restrictions are eased for restaurants to serve outside, that can last for 60 days after the state of emergency ends, from what I've read. So that would go, at least that's what I've read, whether that's fact or not. I've read that just in the press. I think it was in a Globe article. That would go to August 15th, which has some people worried because they would end in the middle of the summer when people would still like to be sitting outside. That's my understanding, that some of the things that were done as a result of the state of emergency continue to 60 days after, but that doesn't apply to the public meetings unless something else is done at the state level.
Dean.
So, considering we're just about a month away from town meeting, is there any consideration about going to a traditional town meeting, or have all of your plans advanced so far that we can't change course at this point?
Well, there are certainly things that we can discuss doing differently, but we have been planning for the inside-outside setup. I know we've secured some rentals and some services from vendors. Those, of course, could be modified if there's a need to. So we'll await any direction on that from the Board of Health or the Select Board. But as of right now, we're still planning for the way we had it before, and of course the additional guidance that will help the moderator put out leading up to town meeting about things like masks and things like that people will probably have questions about.
Well, my only thought was that, with the inside-outside worked okay, but we've always got this fear about what happens if we get rained out. So, certainly if we can move back inside, there could be some pluses behind that. But, it is a dynamic situation.
Jim.
Hi, I got a note from the Mass Municipal Association today, the MMA, and they are certainly advocating strongly for special legislation to allow a couple of these key aspects of the governor's orders to continue past June 15. You mentioned as we both mentioned, the meetings that we have and be able to continue them remotely, and then also in that list was some of the special allowances that were made for businesses that seem very, sensible. I hope we can continue at a time when our businesses are have been so deeply damaged by the pandemic. So I'm certainly happy to, call up my local legislators and say, yes, me too. But if the rest of you are wanting to do this, or if we want to have the town manager represent our feelings to our local legislative branch, that would certainly probably be a helpful thing.
Any other comments on John's report? Yeah, I would just go easy and keep to the hybrid plan that we have for this year. I just don't think people are ready at this point to go indoors unless they absolutely had to for a town meeting. David?
Yeah, I agree with that, but also because to have some certainty around the plans, people have already asked me, are we still doing it, inside, outside? And I just said yes. And I think now people, if it gets thrown up in the air, and we're still deciding into June, that just gets confusing for folks. So I would just like to leave it, but perhaps, to Dean's point, if it happens to rain that last night, perhaps we can just all go in the gym, rather than, push it to the next night. But
let's play it by ear. let's think about going slow on it. And it was interesting because in the original emergency order, I think as amended, each community's legislative branch, which was in our case the town meeting, was exempt from the meeting prohibition, but good common sense that we really can't meet indoors, and that's where the towns created the outdoor or hybrid meetings. One last year. So any further comments? Okay, so there's no public hearings. Under new special business, you saw in the packet that we received a request from the nephew-in-law of Barbara Kelly Smith, who was the co-founder back years ago of Household Goods. She's a neighbor of Dean's on Charter Road. She's turning 90. And the request, which was a good one, is if there could be some recognition or citation from our board recognizing her for all of her good community work and sending her best wishes on her 90th birthday. So let me just turn it over to Dean, who's known Ms. Smith.
Well, there's not much more I can say. I mean, Barbara has been a force to reckon with. She's been a great neighbor, and as John said, she was one of the founders of what started out as a household goods recycling ministry, and then has morphed into a more conventional nonprofit. Just an amazing project, and these Barbara and Ira just continue to work like crazy on this stuff.
Amazing.
They're like the little Energizer bunnies. And I was walking down Charter Road the other day, and she was doing her walk, and she passed me. So I would certainly, if the chair and the manager can work out some wording, I certainly think a certificate of recognition similar to the one that we give out for the Eagle Scout recipients and that sort of thing. I think that would be more than deserved, and I'm sure it would be appreciated.
I would second them. They have done such an incredible job over the years and so helpful to so many, many, many people. And I just congratulate them for their contribution to the community.
So do we have a motion then for the chair and the manager to create a certificate of recognition to Barbara Smith, both on her 90th birthday and her, exemplary service to the town and the larger community?
So moved.
So moved. Is there a second? Okay. So David, if you'd just call the roll, please.
Yes, Mr. Snyder Grant.
Aye. So much aye.
Ms. Gardner.
Aye.
Mr. Charter.
Aye.
Mr. Benson.
Aye.
And I say aye, so that's a hearty unanimous.
Okay, the hearty unanimous. All right. Good. So, John, is Nina with us now?
I believe so. Yes.
Okay. The next item, item 5, is to discuss open meeting law complaints that were filed on May 17th and 19th, 2021 by Mr. Stephen Ballard of Foxborough. These were go to the meeting minutes of April 12th, 26th, and May 3rd. That the discussion in citizen comments and in certain comments I made were not reported at the level that they should, in the detail they should have been. We're not required to produce a transcript, but there needs to be a summary of each item that's taken up at the meeting and to be reported in a way that any individual in the town could read it and understand, what's going on. Nina had told us for the earlier complaint on April 5th for Lisa to rewatch the meeting that portion of the meeting that night, and redo the minutes for that section. And I believe I think has done that. I don't know. I don't know if they were added in the packet, John?
We added, I believe, 3 of the 4 minutes of discussion at some point during the day today.
Okay, I haven't seen those over. And Nina's further recommendation is that we do the same for the minutes of April 12th, 26th, and May 3rd. Nina, would you please comment further on the situation and circumstances?
Sure. I think you gave an accurate summary of where we're at right now. Essentially, there have been complaints about 4 sets of minutes. Those minutes have all been reviewed, and further detail has been provided in the drafts. At this point, it is for the board to review those drafts and approve those minutes if you all feel that the minutes are sufficient. So I don't know if you need more time to review those minutes or if you can take that vote tonight. But I think I had discussions with John and Lisa about the specificity in the minutes. The focus was on the business in front of the board and the decisions being made by the board, and we made sure that those minutes should also include a fulsome review of the public comments and comments from the chair and members during updates.
Okay, so how many, I did not have a chance to get to the 3 sets of minutes. Has anybody taken a look at them?
So just to clarify, they were almost ready to go in the packet this afternoon. I just found out that they aren't, so that's why you didn't see them.
Okay.
Because they're not there.
Okay, fair enough. So let's put them out for the June 7th meeting, and we could take them up then.
And I assume that would be the response to the open meeting law complaints that you had with respect to those minutes. And I think that's the only response that is legally necessary as far as I'm concerned.
Okay, so will you then file a response to Mr. Ballard? A formal response?
Nope, you all just need to make a response at your public meeting. What we need to do is we need to file a notification to the Attorney General's office to clarify that we got a complaint and what we did in response to it. And I always copy Mr. Ballard on those. So essentially your action in public meeting is the response to Mr. Ballard. I'm just informing the Attorney General.
Okay, so we're good. Okay, Jim?
Yeah, I had a question. So at the last meeting, it seemed to me, as a non-lawyer reading the open meeting law, that the minutes need to reflect, the actions and discussions that led up to our decisions, so that we're not making any decisions behind the scenes. And I didn't see that at those particular meetings that we were. At least for the first complaint, that we weren't. These were actually just comments that weren't related to any matter that was before the board.
Yep.
But at the same time, I did notice in the complaint that there was a reference back to the court action from the earlier version of this board went through, and referring to instructions from the judge, and that was all stuff that I knew nothing about. So I was wondering if that's why we're in a situation where on the surface it wouldn't seem like we would need to change our minutes.
Now, let me clarify a few things, Jim, because that's a good point. References that Mr. Ballard makes to the prior litigation with the town are often not consistent with my reading or the judge's reading of that decision.
Mm-hmm.
The town and the Board of Selectmen have never denied that it violated the open meeting law back, again, a year and a half ago now. And we were in court essentially only to fight about whether or not the board did so intentionally. Mr. Ballard and his clients lost on every single count and was admonished by the judge repeatedly. So there's nothing in that judge's decision from prior actions that bears on my advice to you now with respect to the sufficiency of your minutes. As I said before, the sufficiency of your minutes isn't related just to those matters that you take action on. That is certainly a key focus of minutes, is to make sure that people who weren't at the meeting understand how you all reach your decisions. And so it's, as you say, it's not a black box. However, when you have instances like the past few weeks, when you have public comments that are dominating a large portion of that meeting, that should be, the prominence and the debate there should be reflected in the minutes. So the touchstone, as Mr. Benson said, really is, if I am someone who wasn't able to attend the meeting and watch the video, and I picked up the minutes, do I have a pretty clear understanding of what happened at the meeting? And if I looked at prior versions of the minutes, Mr. Ballard, I think, was accurate, that you would think this was maybe a 5-minute conversation early on, and then we went forward with the town business. So the fact that this took up quite a significant portion of your meetings should have been reflected somehow in those minutes. And so this is one of those things where it's, minutes can always be made a little bit more detailed, and it's a hard place to find a line between what's sufficient and what is essentially just requiring least to create a transcript, which we know the law doesn't require. So it's a bit of a judgment call, and as I said, I've worked with John and Lisa to try to figure out where that line is.
Great, that's really helpful. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Any further comments on this item? Okay, Nina, thank you very much. So, moving to item 6, discuss the ALG plan. In the packet, John sent out to us a memo reporting on the $454,000, I guess you might call it, double count in the expense item for the debt service on the North Acton Fire Station for FY22. And that frees up $454,000. And it was a question of what, what do we do with that? So, John, let me turn it over to you. I know Steve Barrett met with the school side to discuss and make sure they have it all straight. We'll have some board discussion, but we would like your recommendation as to how best to deal with it.
Thank you. Yes. So we did confirm. We double checked with the schools, and they agreed that this $454,000 would generate a surplus at the bottom based on the way that we had it in the earlier May ALG plan. So as presented in the memo in the packet, there are a few options that the board and the ALG ultimately can consider with how to handle that. We can lower local receipts by some amount to help accommodate what we are seeing as a potential shortfall in local receipts this current fiscal year. And as you know, if we fall short of our target in FY21, and the budget that we have for FY22 is based on what was initially our projection for 21, the DOR might say, no, you really can't plan for that revenue next year, so you need to readjust your revenue expectations. So we could take this opportunity right now to adjust our revenue projections for 22 by reducing it by an amount of up to $454,000. We can also look at potentially identifying a way to lower the tax levy by an amount of up to $454,000, which would have a minimal impact to the average taxpayer, but it would be an incremental reduction in what we're taxing in the community. We could also look at how we use reserves this year. As you recall, based on Finance Committee recommendations, we didn't use what we would normally use from our free cash reserve. And we instead are proposing to appropriate from our stabilization fund, $658,000. So the board could consider changing how, instead of appropriating so much for stabilization, maybe we use some of this 454 to change that amount to amount lower. Or we could do a combination of all of the above. And so in talking with the finance team, Steve Barrett and others downstairs, we think that we initially were projecting a shortfall between 250 to 500,000. So positive news came in last week in terms of motor vehicle. So the projections are a little bit better. We're now looking at probably 350,000 as an upper limit for a shortfall. So our recommendation is to reduce the FY22 local receipts by at least 350,000 to help make sure that we can absorb any shortfall that we have in FY21, which will allow either some amount of surplus to be in the ALG plan that would just carry through, or other options could be utilized for the remaining.
So the recommendation is to reduce the receipts to the shortfall to 350,000.
Right. So what we're recommending is that we reduce the amount that we're projecting for FY22 local receipts by at least 350,000, which would consume all but 104,000 of the surplus.
And what do you want to suggest we do with the 104?
That we could leave that in the bottom line and let it carry through to reserves for next year, or allow us to absorb anything that happens next year.
Okay, so comments, questions, thank you. Comments and questions from board members. David.
Yeah, I absolutely agree that we should use 350,000 to reduce the local receipts expectation. I also think we should consider with the remainder replenishing the capital stabilization fund, which we're using for the first time this year, and which we don't currently have a plan to replenish. I think we need to develop one with the Finance Committee next year, but we don't really have that plan currently. And so, I would like to see us use the remainder to replenish that.
Okay, thank you. Dean?
I agree with David on that. Certainly 350,000 to reduce our expectations of revenue receipts, a good idea. And yeah, I think many of us felt a little queasy about taking that much money out of stabilization to meet the plan for this year. So, a little bit less pain out of stabilization. So I'd be in favor of the 104,000 or thereabouts, reducing what we're taking out of stabilization.
I agree.
Okay. Jim?
So I'm the newest at this game, so I think my questions are not very deep. But let me ask a simple one. What about taking that 102,000 and just reducing the amount of the increase in the taxes? What's the difficulty or the impact of that?
How much would that, John, if you know, have a impact on the average single family home?
It would be some amount between 20 and around $20 is an estimate. Because if you look at the full amount, 454, if we reduce that amount to reduce, it would have about a $59 impact on the average tax bill. So a portion of that is somewhere in the 20s. The portion that we're talking about is somewhere early 20s.
That's helpful. Thank you. So I'm very comfortable with the 350,000 going to reduce our estimate of future revenue, especially given that we're looking at a shortfall of about that size anyway. So we need to make that up somehow, and this is the easy way. And I could certainly be. It doesn't make that much difference whether people get a $20 reduction in their annual tax bill, given that it's approaching $10,000. But it's symbolic. It might be a nice gesture. It might be a fine thing to do. My understanding, if I follow the logic right, is that this then reduces this increases the amount that we're not using of our 2.5% cap. So in future years, if we need it, we can increase by slightly more than 2.5% if we haven't used the full 2.5% this year. So it's not like we're not giving up that money forever, but to give people
Yeah, that's true. That's correct.
it's that. So I'm not the big finance guy of the five of us. So but that was my initial thought.
Okay. So with the instruction then to Dean, John, and I to go back to our ALG meeting on Thursday and report that we'd, from the town side, we'd use the 454 first to reduce the local receipt shortfall by $350,000, and the remaining $104,000 would replenish the capital stabilization fund.
Yes.
Thumbs up across the board.
Yeah, thumbs up. But I'm also, if I'm comfortable with what Jim suggested too, if that's the way ALG is leaning.
Okay.
So either of those is okay with me.
All
But
right.
I just said, the reason I said the capital stabilization fund is that we don't have a method to replenish it at the moment. So again, I think we need to develop one, but right at the moment we don't have a procedure, a plan, a convention.
Okay. And Joan and Jim, you'd be comfortable if we used David's alternative, reducing the. Well, that was your suggestion.
Oh yeah, either way, whatever
Okay.
the ALG works
Okay.
out, I'm comfortable.
Okay, that's good. Okay. Next item is an update on discussions with the Kmart property owner. Dean and John had a conversation last week with Atlantic Retail, which are the brokers for Stop and Shop, and Dean is prepared to report on that conversation. After that, we'll take comments from board members and then general citizen comments as well. So, Dean?
Okay. So I had the conversation with two reps from Atlantic Retail, just to let them know, and they're already aware of it, that there's a certain amount of interest amongst some members of the public in Acton to look at a community center, and they're kind of focused on the Kmart site. So the bottom line on it is that at this point, the property has been withdrawn from the market. So it's not in the market right now. Stop and Shop is looking at all of their options. It's sort of a dynamic market in real estate out there right now. As we all know from presentations that were made to this board, there are a number of players out there that are interested in the property. Stop and Shop is just taking a little bit of a breather to assess all of the possibilities. That breather will probably be at least 60 days and could be somewhat longer. We could be looking at a situation well into November or December before they make a decision. At present, Kmart still controls the property. They're still paying rent on it. Their lease does not expire until the end of November. I don't think they're going to get released out of the lease. So I think that it's still basically tied up at this point until November. And, the speculation from the folks at Atlantic Retail is that, anything that might get redeveloped, we're probably not going to see a lot of progress on that until probably sometime next spring. So we're probably a year away, probably 60 days minimum away from making a decision. I think at this point, the wisest course, where we're only a few weeks away from town meeting, we should probably kick this can down the road to the next board. And in July, when the new board has been seated and we've reorganized, one of our first orders of business is to have a goal-setting meeting. And I think there should be some discussion, new board, as to whether or not some sort of a feasibility study of whether we need a community center or not should take place. And a community center does not necessarily mean at that location. It does not mean, at this point, the ideas, the universe of ideas that have been thrown out there about what a community center is and what it might have been, is just so diverse. We really need to be able to nail things down. If the town decided they wanted to buy it, the property, and I'm not advocating that, but if they wanted to, the steps we'd have to do is the Board of Selectmen or the Select Board would have to send a letter to Atlantic Retail making an offer for the property of presumably around $6.5 million. We'd be given a certain amount of time, about 90 days, for due diligence. And then from the end of the 90 days until when we're ready to buy it, if we've got a long delay before a town meeting coming up, then the town would be assessed about $10,000 a month just to keep the property available to us. So in order to buy the option, it'd be $10,000 a month. Obviously, buying a piece of property like that, it's going to require a 2/3 vote at town meeting, and it's going to involve a huge amount of feasibility studies, consideration, public outreach. We're just not there yet. And I explained all of this to the folks in Atlantic Retail. They understand it. There's a lot of people go out and kick the tires. So they know that there is this group that's interested in it, and they know the situation that we're in, that in my personal opinion, I don't think the Board of Selectmen is presently constituted is ready to make an offer. And I'm somewhat skeptical if the new board, the two new folks, are going to be ready to make an offer. But that's kind of where we are, and I think I've discharged the promise that I made that I'd reach out to these folks.
So comments first from board members or questions? Jim.
Sure. Thanks, Dean, for going through all that. I for one would be in favor of starting a needs assessment and a feasibility study, and considering that with the next board. I think that's the right timing. And when I say needs assessment, I think you've correctly identified a challenge here, Dean, which is that there's a lot of different parts that could go into what a community center is, and each one of them needs to be understood as far as what facilities are available now, who would use this new facility, how much would people feel would be worth it to pay for those facilities. And there's obviously a lot of questions about, whether there's a pool there, whether there's a basketball court there, whether there's a maker space, whether there's spaces for small businesses. There's a lot of things that could go into a community center, and each one of them is going to need their own look at, are there people that need this? Are there people that would be able to take advantage of it? Are there people that would pay for it? And then you roll into a feasibility study. Once you understand what the needs are, then there's the question of, how do we construct a package of, to buy, build, and operate. such a place with the identified needs. We've seen the appropriate pace in a democracy in a small town for settling those things is not fast. There's some technical aspects there that sound like bringing in a consultant. There's bringing in the various constituencies and making sure they're heard from. It's a careful process. It's slow. It may or may not. And given the facts I hear today, I imagine not. I imagine it would not end up at the Kmart lot, but stranger things have happened. With the cost of lumber being 3 times as much as it was a few months ago, there's not a lot of people eager to buy a lot where they're going to need to build a bunch of things. So it could be that this gets delayed. Both Stop and Shop acts very slowly, and Kmart, or Sears rather, continues for some odd reason to be really interested in paying rent on this place, to the extent that, as you reported, they're not even giving Stop and Shop permission to go into the building to assess the state of it. So we're certainly not going to get permission either. So everything here is just going to go slow, and I think it is really important that we acknowledge that we want more community connection. It was one of the key goals that got identified in the last 2020 plan, and see where that takes us. Maybe it takes us to a building. Maybe it takes us to a series of buildings. Maybe it takes us to land that the town already owns somewhere else. Maybe it takes us to some part of the Kmart site or the entire Kmart site. So I think it's an exciting prospect, and it's going to require patience. Thanks.
Thanks, Jim. David.
Yes, I agree with all the things that Jim said about this being, there's no consensus yet about what exactly would go into the community center and how it would be run and that kind of thing. It needs a lot of work to get there. And for me, I would never advocate buying a piece of land unless we had an exact plan for it. I am supportive of doing a feasibility study or establishing a committee to look into this further, under the auspices of the reformed board in July, and then we can see how things go from there. But I agree with Jim that it's going to take some time.
Joan?
No, I think it needs to be considered, and it's an expensive proposition, so I don't think we're going to move on it tonight.
Dean?
Yeah, just as a follow-up, and I've suggested this with various advocates that have contacted me, and we've had some good meetings, good discussions. And one of the things I think is important to consider is that anything like this is going to take a long time to develop a constituency. Even after you establish a need, you got to still build a constituency. The senior center took us 10 years, and we ended up with, I think, some pretty good rental space, but that frankly was not our first option. And again, with the new board, I think we should meet with the town manager and discuss some things like, are there any available spaces for certain hours that might be used as sort of a community center light kind of thing. Obviously, the Human Services Center that's closed on the weekends and in the evenings might be a good spot to kind of test run a few programs and see if this idea has any legs or not. So I think that's part of the duties, again, with the new board, to discuss that with the town manager and for the manager to work with his staff to see what can be feasibly done with it. Obviously, opening up buildings like that in odd hours is going to require some cost with, maintenance and custodial and that sort of thing. It's not something we just dump on the existing staff and say, well, suck it up. There's going to have to be some money made available to do that if that's a route that we want to follow. But I think that might be a good transition step, and it might might start to establish whether there's really a need and desire for this.
David.
If I could just make one follow-up comment. One of the things that's not understood currently is whether the community center would be combined with the senior center or separate. And that's a key thing, and there's dramatic disagreement in town as to whether that should be. And so we need to figure that out and make, trying to find people's concerns and do that. And I would say for the community center overall, the email coming into the board is about evenly split. So we see people against it, we see people for it, but there's not a dramatic preference either way. But we're certainly nowhere near 2/3. Right as it is now, I can't see this passing town meeting it. Not even close.
Okay, Dean, any further sense from Atlantic Retail whether what idea Stop and Shop might have if they wanted to redevelop the parcel?
Well, because it's just speculation. Stop and Shop already has a presence here in Acton. Whether they would decide to put a new store in there in the Kmart site, and what they would do with the existing presence they've got down on Route 62, that would be kind of the obvious thing that I would jump to when we talk about, a supermarket company is in the business of building supermarkets. But there could be, other options. I think it's all sort of, it sounds to me from speaking with Atlantic Retail, it sounds like they're pretty close to closing the deal with National Development that we saw at this board meeting a few months ago. So I think everything is on the table. It's a private property transaction. They're aware of what the zoning restrictions are. Certainly, with the earlier discussion, there was never any discussion about going for zoning changes for the site. But it could be anything. But it's a challenging time. I don't think there's a lot of folks have a lot of extra money right now to invest in these sorts of things.
Okay, so let's open it up now to general citizen comments. Matt?
All right, our first one's from Kelly Stowe. Kelly, you should be able to speak.
Hi, can you guys hear me okay?
Yes, Kelly.
Wonderful. Kelly Stowe, 109 Hayward Road. I was one of the ladies that presented to you last week on the community center concept. And I first just wanted to extend my thanks to Dean and to the town manager. I think the town manager was involved in in speaking to Stop and Shop or the Atlantic Retail folks and just talking about this. I really appreciate you following through on that, and I'm just grateful. I want to just kind of acknowledge some of the comments that the board members made. I acknowledge the timeliness considerations. I understand that it would be pretty aggressive to run out and purchase the property tomorrow, and I don't think that we have that expectation. I acknowledge that there is a need to build consensus and address some of the concerns across the community about what might or might not go into such a center. And I'm thrilled to see some of the board members who will be in the next select board express support for a needs assessment and/or feasibility study. I think that's a tremendous first step towards establishing such a feature for the community, and I'm excited to learn more about that in the future. I appreciate Dean's idea to use existing spaces to start building community now. I think that's a fantastic idea. I think it might be a little bit challenging, but we can see what we can do. And I just wanted to note in response to Jim Snyder-Grant's comment about lumber, the nice thing about the lot there is that it already has a structure, so there wouldn't be a whole lot of lumber needed. But anyway, I just wanted to say thank you again. Really appreciate you following through on what you said you were going to do and appreciate the support to continue investigating. Thanks.
Thank you, Kelly.
All right.
Further comments? Yeah.
Yes, Mr. Chair. We're going to hear next from Roxy Rocker. Roxy, you should be able to speak.
Hello, thank you so much, Select Board. This is Roxy. I was the other one that spoke last week, and I appreciate your time again. I've heard some really good things tonight, and I think, Dean, you did a great job of getting some really good education and awareness and support with, getting the knowledge. I agree with you as a business owner that timing is just not the right time. But I hear having a feasibility study is a good thing. I hear, really finding out the consensus. Jim, I respect everything that you're saying. What do we need at community centers? And, what do the townspeople want, or if they want? I think one of the biggest things that I would like to say is that there's a changing time happening in our world within like the next 2 to 6 weeks, that masks are coming off and isolation is going to be changing. So I think one of the bigger things is, how do we go into a maskless society, one? And how do we bring people back out into community and take people out of isolation? So I think some of the next conversations maybe our team or other constituents could possibly be having is on some of this, and how do we work with the town, work with community leaders to figure out some of these issues that are going to be happening with constituents. And then the next thing is I think it would be a wonderful idea if some kind of a committee or some kind of town formation was formed. And I'm hoping to ask, I don't know if it's possible, that there's a collaborative between Boxborough and Acton, that some decisions could be made in relationship with the town and relationship with leadership to kind of figure out what's the best steps, what's the next phases, and how do we go about this in the most respectful way to constituents and to the town. So I just really want to thank you for your time and all of your efforts, and I would really appreciate you all meeting with our team. Thank you.
Thank you, Roxy.
All right, next up we'll hear from Colin User. I believe this is Tara from earlier, but if you could just let us know who you are and where you're from.
Hi, this is Tara from West Acton. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. So I'd like to ask a couple of questions, and then I have a statement depending on the answers. Is that okay?
Begin, sure.
So the first question is that I wonder whether just talking to the real estate agents is the best idea, because the real estate agents want to sell, whereas Stop and Shop may have other ideas that we could fit into. So it might behoove us to talk to Stop and Shop, not the real estate agents, not the real estate division that is interested in selling. There's often in these huge conglomerates is you have the real estate division, and then they separate the people that want to sell it and the people that want to keep it. So they're two different groups with different goals. And the other question was, did you ask them if they're willing to take less money? That was something that I'm interested in.
Dean?
They reiterated what the asking price is. There's absolutely no movement on it. And really, there wouldn't be at this point, because Stop and Shop's taken it off the market and said they're studying it themselves. So
yeah, thank you. Because probably about 6 months ago, we got somebody had talked to the real estate agent and told us that they would be willing to take in the high fives, and it might be even less. But that was a year ago too. I don't know. Relative to what I've been hearing, I love the idea of a community center. I have some experience running concert facilities, event facilities, and would certainly be interested in helping that location in particular become revenue neutral or as close as possible. I'm not that interested in some place everybody's got to drive to. I'm very interested in that location. I love the idea of the existing building. The appraisal from John Avery indicated that the building is usable. And I talked to a couple of people over the weekend, and it looks like this fire suppression would need to be upgraded. All that seems very affordable. There is no other site for a downtown. All other locations will be remote and less used. It is our last chance, and I hope that we move to acquire it. Thank you. Even if we don't use it for a community center, we can always sell it, and it's like money in the bank as far as I'm concerned, especially if we rezone it ourselves. But either way, I'm very interested in that location, as we had said. And I would like very much, I had asked this on email, if we could see the letters that are coming in, if you could put them in a folder, that would be very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Tara.
All right, next up we'll hear from Nancy Cochran. Nancy, you should be able to speak.
All right, can you hear me now?
Yes, Nancy.
Okay. I'm very, very pleased with the balanced approach that Dean and John came up with, because a friend and active resident in town mentioned to me a concern about that building, which, given the era that the building was built, has probably got significant asbestos. And I have not heard of anyone looking at the structural components inside the building. We all know that since the origins of 2020, a community center was floated, and there are a lot of options. This is not our last ditch effort at a community center. So I'm pleased that it's going the way it's going, and I appreciate the hard work and balanced decision-making of the board. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy.
All right, we have one more from Christopher Hardy. Christopher, you should be able to speak.
Yes, hi everybody. I wanted to thank Dean and John Mangiarotti, the town manager, for going out above and beyond and kind of, getting not support, but letting the real estate agent of Stop and Shop know that we have an interest. We're gathering support. Everybody, the select board that has been talking so far, we have some steps to take. We have, I thank you for mentioning those and being supportive of I feel I'm very supportive of the process that you laid out. I hope that we, myself and maybe the other people that have been speaking tonight that have been part of this endeavor to help us get support and purchase the property at Kmart for the purpose of the community center, to be able to meet together to kind of give us a more one-on-one, our vision and insight that we've worked so hard for the past couple of weeks or 2 months. And we wanted to just share. I've been very passionate and I've been very go, 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 rah, rah, rah. And I just want to express and say thank you for listening. I might have come across a little abrasive, and I want to apologize to any select board member or committee member that I've spoken to publicly right now. And I'm sorry if I came across like that. It was not my intention. I just get very emotional, and this is very happy for me to hear this from the board, the support and the process that you've laid out that we're going to go through. And thank you. And I appreciate your time and consideration for all this.
Thank you, Christopher. Is there anyone else, Matthew?
Mr. Chair, that does it.
Sure. Dean, just a question for you as the town's longtime municipal properties director. How would you, if you could offer your sense on managing expectations as to the reuse of the Kmart building as it is now? What should we be thinking about?
Well, I think some of the obvious things. First off, we haven't been in it. In fact, the folks in Stop and Shop, their real estate division hasn't had a chance to really get in and study it carefully either. Now, it's a building that's about 50 years old, which certainly met building code at that time. But whether it meets present day codes and changes use categories from retail to normally placed public assembly, It's just a huge amount of work that needs to be done there. There is all sorts of things like the energy system in it, HVAC. How old is that? Has it ever been updated? If we move into it, are we going to keep what we've got there? I suspect it's probably natural gas. So then are we looking at renewing the natural gas system that's there, or do we go with something new? Roof load issues, a lot of seismic issues that were not considered 50 years ago. Suggestions made about what kind of materials are inside that building. Is that old enough that, are we looking at 64,000 square feet of asbestos composition tile on the floor to be dealt with? We don't know. So, the first thing you want to do if you're thinking about this is, plan on coming up with $50,000 or $100,000 to bring a bunch of engineers and architects in there to tear the whole thing apart and figure out what you've got to deal with, and then make a decision whether it's wiser to use the existing building or whether it's wiser to tear it down and start out fresh. Having some of these old buildings is not necessarily an easy thing to do. So there's a lot of work to be done on it. And there's just so many things that we don't know about it. I think one point earlier, Selectman Martin said something to the effect of, there's more things we don't know than there are things we do know about it. So it's in my opinion, it's not going to be a slam dunk. Just looking at the recent upgrades we've had to do in some of our own buildings that that we can actually get access to. It's not easy and it's not quick.
Well, thank you, Jim.
Just some final thoughts. I wanted to acknowledge Chris's apology, and I just want him to know that apology accepted. I never took his passion as criticism. I just saw it as passion, and that's exactly what's needed in a civic space to get things done. Is you have to care about things. But thanks for acknowledging your style, that it was that it was big, and sometimes that's a challenge for people. That can be a challenge for me sometimes. Second thought, we have about 50 people, 50 participants, 60 now. So I just want people to get a sense of how much people care about this issue, that, if we were in room 204, this would look like a meeting room full of people. So this is clearly, this is an issue that luckily will not go away. I think that the amount of isolation in this town was already a lot before COVID. It's worse now, and I feel like the community center idea is a way of trying to address this really big issue of isolation and loneliness. So I'm glad we are figuring out how to talk about
it. Further comments from board members? Yeah, just in conclusion, to reiterate what Jim said. Christopher and Kelly and Roxy, it's a slow process, and you got to determine the need, and you've really got to build a constituency for it. That's called outreach, and the projects we were successfully able to bring to fruition over the last couple of years, the North Acton Fire Station. And the Kelly's Corner infrastructure project. Those were both around since the 1970s. Of course, you won't have that time luxury here because Stop and Shop will at some point sell the property. So, okay. So, thank you. And, this will be, I guess, a priority item for the new board when it convenes in July.
Mr. Chair,
yes.
Two additional hands went up during Mr. Snyder Grant's comments. Would you like to take them?
Sure, of course.
Okay, we're going to hear from a call-in user. Please let us know who you are and where you're from.
Hi, this is Jen from West Deck. I just had one little bit of information. Can I continue for about 30 seconds?
Sure.
Over the weekend, a commercial rehab contractor expressed some interest in the project and said something about an estimate costing about $1,000 if we could get access to the building. So I know that I could probably raise that money pretty well overnight, and so it's just something to think about if you'd like to get at least that information, because I agree that there are more questions than answers right now. But based on John Avery's appraisal and the existing conditions that he put in there just a couple of years ago, I believe that it seems worth checking out at least. So anyways, if you want. Bye.
Thank you, Tara. Matt, I think there's one additional individual.
There is actually two now.
Okay, sure.
Jennifer, I'm going to butcher this last name. Madbury? Mabardi, thank you.
Hi. Thank you for allowing us to speak again. I am just calling in from the perspective of things that I believe, again, like I'm with Tara. I think that the Kmart parcel being in the center of town is very critical in bringing the town together. That does seem very fragmented. And I will speak to the fact that in the past 10 years, I have participated in helping plan many events, some auctions at elementary schools. We never had venues to look at in Acton. We had to go to Devon's and we had to go to Stowe. I have also participated in the Miracle League Casino Nights, where we had to go to Westford. And I have also attended the Acton Food Pantry Food Chef Challenge, which again was in Stowe. And I think that is one of my biggest concerns, is that we never have a place in Acton to look to do anything, being someone who helps plan events. So I do, and again, I do think the Kmart parcel is the correct location. So that's all I have to say about that.
Thank you, Jennifer.
Thank you.
All right, one more from Christopher. Chris, you are able to speak.
Yes, thank you. I just have one request, two-part maybe. Is it possible for the people that have spoken who represent this effort to sit down to share our vision in more detail? It's some things we found out that maybe it hasn't been addressed publicly or whatever before the July goals meeting. And if so, we'd like to at least attend that goals meeting as maybe quiet partners. I don't know how that goals meeting runs, but we just like to sit down and share in detail more of what we've learned on, because we've been working very hard on everything. And I'd like to also reiterate the request by Tara that the $1,000 for the estimate for the rehab would go a long ways in determining whether this property is actually useful to be able to rehab the building. I think that's not asking too much at this point in time, this junction. And so I've got those two requests that I'd like just to kind of throw out there.
Thank you. Yeah, the goal setting meeting is like any other meeting. It's an open meeting, and citizens may come, and whether they're let's leave it to the next board as to how they wish to proceed. Okay, thank you then. Good comments, good discussion. So we're up to item 8, which would be consider approval of government's agreement for Regional Emergency Communication Center with Concord. Let me turn it back to John. I think John has some news out of Concord for us.
Hi, thank you. Yes, I'm just trying to share my screen. What I'd like to do, if the board is okay with that, is to introduce our consultant on the project to run through a brief presentation to recap sort of exactly what we're asking the board to consider approving tonight. Again, this is related to the establishment of a regional emergency communication center between the town of Acton and Concord. We had a meeting earlier with the Concord Select Board, and that board has approved moving forward with this step. And so we're asking the Acton Select Board to take similar action. But I'd like to introduce Tom Kennedy actually, Matt Murphy, could you bring Thomas Kennedy into the mix here? He's probably in his TJK something. Sorry about that.
Be able to speak.
Tom?
Yep, I'm good.
Okay.
Well, first of all, it's actually it's great to be able to talk with the Acton Select Board tonight. It's you have a great team that I worked with in doing the feasibility study, as well as to assisting in for the governance agreement, as well as all of the other supporting information. My background is that I was 30 years in the state police. I retired. I was a lieutenant colonel, and during my time, I had an opportunity to work with the establishment of two wireless centers, one in Framingham, one in Northampton, and then 3 regional emergency communication centers, and one in they're all in Western Mass. And why I bring that up is that what I have seen is that many positive aspects of regional emergency communication center, and it was recognized as a benefit by I did 9 interviews with police chiefs, fire chiefs, dispatch personnel, that identified that there was that the regional center between Acton and Concord would provide additional dispatch personnel while there was an increase of or a surge of calls from large events or extreme weather or major incidents. John, if you
lost you.
Yeah, John, if you could move that.
All right.
Great. And as well as opportunities for dispatch advancements, new equipment and better technology, standardized dispatch protocols, efficiencies through the economy of scale and combined resources, and increased professionalism of operations and increased expectations for an independent dispatch department. Those were the operational benefits, but there are also financial benefits that, the first item has to do with the non-recurring capital costs. These would be investments with that State 911 would be making into the upgrade of the equipment that's in the town of Acton. And that what I did is I broke down your equipment into the expectations for the life cycle of the equipment, and then all that was outdated, I was able to spread that over the cost over 5 years. So the 407,465 represents 20% of that total cost of the equipment that needed to get replaced, as well as the recurring costs of $375,054, and that came from the economy of scale, as well as the funding that actually the state 911 department will make into it. John, got one more? The governance agreements is really it's been established by law as to how to create a regional dispatch center. It was passed in 2013, and it was to provide to maximize effective emergency and 911 dispatch services, as well as to provide regional interoperability for the citizens of the Commonwealth. The agreement would provide for a 5-year commitment to work together to deliver dispatch services. The agreement is binding, but participation of the towns is not. The agreement provides that if the state 911 development grant funds are not awarded, the agreement will remain in effect, but the project to regionalize does not need to move forward. The grant guidelines are very competitive. They use a priority criteria with an executed agreement that's being presented before you tonight. A submitted grant application is rated priority 2. It's a very high rating, and that I believe that state 911 would look very favorably on the creation of the regional center at Acton in conjunction with the town of Concord. Without it, it drops down to a priority 4, and the likelihood of getting funded for a new regional center is very minimal. John? A participating community can withdraw with written notice to the chair of the board not less than 3 years prior, unless there is a unanimous vote of the board. In practice, the three-year requirement would be waived for withdrawal if significant development grant funds have not been expended. The termination of membership shall be effective 30 days following the payment of all obligations incurred and no less than 2 years from the receipt of the notice of termination. No participating community shall be entitled to retain or be reimbursed for any costs or liabilities incurred prior to the effective date of the termination. Ongoing obligations like other personnel benefits would transfer back to the withdrawing community. Participating communities shall address the impacts caused by the termination by either encouraging other parties to join the district or by reducing expenses of the district. Termination shall remain liable for any assessment, the terminating party, I should say, for any assessment in full until the end of the current fiscal year, absent mitigation, and the types of activities to be taken in mitigation shall be determined at the sole discretion of the remaining participating communities. This is what the organizational structure of both communities. There is the select board, the responsibilities of the town manager, as well as the police and fire chief for the administrative of your current dispatch operations. Under the regional center, the select board has responsibilities for the town manager. The town manager has specific responsibilities, as does the police and fire chiefs for the dispatch operations. The town manager would be one of the administrative board members. The police and fire chief would be members of an operations board with a focus on operational practices, dispatch protocols, and policy and procedures, as well as they will oversee the performance of the regional dispatch district. Next. Now, there has been, and it was in the region, the feasibility study, what you currently are spending, and that includes your personnel expenses as well as salary and benefits and other government costs. You're currently spending $776,424. There are other expenses like support expenses of $36,500 for a total of $812,924 that you are currently spending. Next. John, if you could move over to the next one.
Yeah, it doesn't seem to be going. Sorry. Hold on. Come on. Here we go.
Thank you. The support and incentive grants in the state 911 supports with incentives the creation of regional emergency communication centers. They have, one question is always asked: what's the viability in the long term of these funds for the support of these regional centers? And that everybody pays a fee right now, with your monthly cell phone bill. It provides the funding for the support of the 911 centers, as well as their own sustainability, as well as advancements in the development of regional emergency communication centers. They have there's three different kinds of programs. One is support and incentive grants, and that's what you would receive on an annual basis from the state 911. I was able to get these figures for $140,000 of support money. A portion of that you currently get now, but the big item is really for the Regional Emergency Communication Center of 561,224 for a total of 701. There's also development grants that you would apply for, which both Acton and Concord did. They requested $2.1 million for the equipment and other transition expenses that covered such items as radio interoperability, upgrading of the radio systems, a redesigned dispatch center, software for CAD and records management systems, and in the connection with the fire alarm systems over in Concord, so that they can be monitored at the regional dispatch district. And it also provides funding for personnel and for a transition award. The next, John. The transition award is really quite significant because a year ago, at a 911 board meeting, they approved a transition award for communities that operate currently operate a public safety answering point, and they decommission it to join a regional center. They have the state, through this grant program, pays for the cost of the assessment or the charge for the community for the current year under the terms of the intermunicipal agreement. That, in essence, pays for the membership into the regional center for fully for a 3-year period. And in the following 2 years, there are 2 grant cycles. One that the first one pays 50% of the greater of the last allocation to the decommissioned public safety, or the second and a second time of 25% of the last allocation for the decommissioned public safety. In other words, they're going to pay for the cost of you joining a regional dispatch district fully for 3 years. In the 4th year, they pay for 50%. In the 5th year, they pay for 25%. That's over and above the cost of the support and incentive money. So there's significant savings for your non-recurring capital costs. You would be saving some $407,465.99, and that would that really covers a 5-year period. And then and there's a recurring cost savings of $375,054. So the savings to the town of Acton is really quite significant. John, the next. The budget process that, the question has often come up, does the town lose this oversight? And the reality is that you don't. The executive director and the operations committee that's made up of the of your police and fire chiefs. Shall develop and recommend to the Finance Advisory Committee, which is made up of the your current chief financial officers and chief administrative officers, an annual budget by mid-December of each year. The Finance Committee shall recommend an annual budget to the board. The board shall set a schedule for an annual budget preparation that permits time for due deliberation prior to the statutory required February 1st notice to the participating communities of their shared costs for the following year. And the annual budget shall set forth all anticipated expenses and revenues for the following fiscal year and contingency funds for unanticipated operating and capital expenses. And next, once the budget is established, each town will be assessed its share. The town managers will include the assessment in the public safety budget proposals, and the assessment and supporting documentation would be presented to the Finance Committee and the Select Board as part of an annual town budget process. Cost sharing. The state 911 is, they allocate out funds based upon your 911 call volume and your population. This is an example of using that same methodology as how Acton and Concord would share their costs. Acton, because the population is slightly higher and the call volume is slightly higher, that ratio would be 53.26%. The Concord would be 46.74%. So that's how the costs would be shared between the two communities. The employees, all existing employees, will have an opportunity to work for the district. The board, the town managers, would be committed to negotiating a fair contract that reflects the new working conditions and would maintain competitive benefit structure. There would be provided new promotional opportunities and new professional development and professional growth opportunities. The timeline is on May 31st. The signed executed government agreement would be submitted to the State 911 Department. On June 30th, the State 911 Department would send out award letters to the recipients. The activities following that would be you review the award. If fully awarded, the project timelines call for a transition to the regional center by October 1st, 2022. And if the project is not funded at all, the implementation of the creation of the REC will be put on pause. Before I say this, is dispatching is very different than what it was 10, 20, and 30 years ago. It truly is a profession. The people who are dispatchers today and their supervisors are required to be very technically astute in as to how 911 calls. It doesn't come in just on, your hard wire line. It comes in on wireless systems. That is a challenge to identify exactly where the person is. It comes in on text. It comes in on video. So that it is a challenge, and there is the town manager is making the move that the Acton Select Board accept the provisions of Section 180, I should say 18O to 18V, inclusive of Chapter 6A of the General Laws, providing for the establishment of a regional 911 emergency communication district, together with the towns of Acton and Concord, and the construction or siting, administration, operation, and maintenance of the Regional 911 Emergency Communications Center by the district under the provision of the proposed district agreement filed with the select board.
Well, thank you, Tom, for walking us through that and for reading this proposed motion that the board could consider taking after a discussion of what's been presented. We do have the rest of our team here with this evening. Chief Burrows is here, Town Manager Crane from Concord, Chief Judge from Concord, and are all here. If there's any questions from board members, I will stop sharing my screen so we can see each other here.
Tom, what could you just explain the process going forward to the town's final approval of this joint dispatch center?
The town's final approval of this would be, if the board agrees with the governance agreement, they authorize the town managers to sign those, and they submit those to the state 911 department. That is a significant step in order to be funded, in this next round of funding. There was a, as I mentioned before, there was a grant that was submitted, and that it does cover $2.1 million, in order to implement all of the recommendations in the original feasibility report.
Okay, and what does the town meeting, that's our legislative body, have a final say as to whether we're in or out? How does that work?
I believe that the law allows the select board to approve it and authorize the town manager to sign and submit.
Okay, so
town meeting's role would be approving the annual budget that we propose for this district going forward. But in terms of establishing it as a district, the 16 chapter, the chapter referenced earlier, sets up the whole process to be enabled locally by the select board.
Okay, so if we vote tonight, we're voting to establish the district and to go forward on the basis of the agreement that's before us that Concord approved earlier today.
Yes.
Okay. Joan.
Yes, and all of this would be in the Acton Public Safety Building, or would there be any addition necessary?
So the way that we've structured it based on what we understand to this point is that the existing public safety facility was built with the space to expand, and that this district would be able to utilize that space with some retrofitting that would be funded by the state, and we would use it right here at the public safety facility in Acton.
Thank you.
Are there any further questions or comments or runs? Jim?
Yeah, I should say that I'm in favor of this, and I do have some questions. The administrative board, that would be the town managers, is that the kind of board that's subject to the open meeting law?
Yes.
Okay. But maybe, what about the subcommittees, the operations board and the finance board? Are those also OML bodies?
Yes.
Great, thank you.
So they're subject to the open meeting law, and we would determine exactly what it's subject to, which portions of the open meeting law is subject to.
Right. Yeah, okay, thank you. One of the things that's unique about our financial decision-making process is the ALG. Now that relates most specifically to the negotiations between the schools and the town, but I wonder how you envision the role of the ALG in the process of the development of the dispatch budget.
My initial thoughts from, at least from the town manager's perspective on how I would participate as a board director in this new entity is that we would develop a budget as we do every year with the police chief and fire chief, and in this case, the director of the dispatch operation, and bring it forward in a town manager recommended budget in December, and then go through the whole budget process. And if there's a need to make changes or address it, we would handle it through the budget process. And given that this is the first year, or if next year is the first year, we would certainly do things a little sooner and earlier just to keep everyone informed.
Thank you.
Dean? I'm sorry.
Sorry, just a couple. Would it be okay to ask a couple?
No,
more
please
questions?
go ahead.
Okay, thanks. The agreement, a large portion of the agreement is constructed in such a way as to make it clear and relatively straightforward the process of adding additional towns to the agreement. In other words, a new agreement would not be necessary. It's already structured to allow multiple towns and to simply expand the administrative board to include the town managers of each of the towns. So I'm wondering if any of you folks have had serious conversations, that are still alive about including other towns in this regional command center after it gets going.
So I guess I'll go first. I think I mentioned last time that we always look for opportunities to regionalize, and we always ask everyone. I ask everyone around us. So I'm sure it's come up in conversation one time or another, but we found early on, based on the synergies between the two communities of Acton and Concord and the collaboration already in place with the public safety folks, that this was something that we really wanted to push. So we've been sort of focused on just these two communities and making it a successful partnership. And I haven't had any substantive conversations with other communities at this point.
I would agree with that. Yes, sir. Good evening, everyone. I would agree with that. I haven't had any conversations, substantive or otherwise, with another community. I think the thing is, I agree with what John is saying. Our goal is to build a great AC rec and have it really serve the residents of Concord and Acton with excellence. That regional dispatch centers have a tendency to grow once they are, online and successful. Is something that I don't think we can ignore, but that's not what we're trying to do here. I mean, could it happen? Of course it could. The state has a policy goal of creating a regionalized dispatch, but I want all of you to know the same message I conveyed to the Concord board, that even, that's not a part of this planning process. We're planning for a 2-town rec, and it's going to be great. And if other towns see that greatness and want to join, there's a process for that. But as of now, it's just the two of us.
Thanks. Final comment. So we did get this email from Joanne Harpin sort of referring us to the May 17 Concord Select Board meeting and some comments from Henry Dane. And I just wanted to say that I listened to that, and I listened to the response by the two town managers, and I thought you addressed all the issues quite squarely. So it was reassuring to me to hear that the Concord Select Board went ahead and approved the agreement, even after hearing, various concerns. And in particular, it seems to me that this operation depends on the board's mutual experience and trust of our town managers. I mean, the fact that I know that John is going to be, working with the finance director and the finance committee when that's appropriate, and the board when that's appropriate. I think that's part of what makes this work, is that we understand, based on our personal experience, that this is not some empire building exercise. This is an exercise in creating better services at a better price. So thanks for working on this. I know this has been a lot of work.
Are there any, David?
Yes, thank you. So I'm in favor of this. I think it's kind of win-win are win-win-win. It saves money for both communities, and the broader scope of the command center, I think, benefits both communities. And I think that, having a cooperative relationship with Concord, increases the positive ties with a neighboring community, and I think that's very good as well. So I'm in favor.
Dean.
Yeah, 2 points. Responding to Jim's question about how the budget would work with ALG. Based on my experience this past year as a member of ALG, I can't imagine this level of detail would even come up. It's part of the town manager's overall budget. We don't, on the town side, we don't question the budget for the high school English department. And so I don't think that anybody's going to question what happens in dispatch and the budget for it. So I don't see that as being a stumbling block. And I'll just, chime in with everybody else that I think this is a great move forward. And thank you guys for working so hard on it. And I'm ready to move ahead with it.
Okay. Are there any further comments from board members? Okay, let's open it up to a public comment. Matt?
Okay, I believe this is Tara, but it is a call-in user, so just confirm who you are and where you're from.
Hi, this is Tara from West Acton. Can you hear me?
Yes.
So I want to ask a couple questions and then I'll make a comment. And my questions are around the configuration of the board of directors. And I thought I heard that Acton would have less than 50% of the seats. I originally imagined that Acton and Concord would split everything. But now I heard something about the state having a seat on the board, or it seems like we're giving up power in a sense, although we have to approve everything at town meeting in terms of budget. But in terms of operations and policies and procedures, are you talking about diluting Acton's power? And if not, then how would the seats on the board of directors be divvied up to ensure that Acton still had as much power?
John?
Each community would have one seat. The state would not have a seat.
So there's only 2 seats.
So yeah, each community would have one seat. So there'd be the town managers in each community work together as a board of directors to make decisions.
Suppose you're deadlocked.
We find a compromise.
Okay.
And that would be somewhat like the NAGOD water situation?
No.
Anyway, so I feel like once we do this, we'll never get it back. So I feel like we're not asking enough questions about what would happen if we don't like it. And I also feel like, at least I'm reading online studies talking about consolidation of power or regionalization, that vulnerable people suffer. And so I hear the consultants, I hear the financial arguments. What I don't hear is I don't hear anything from the other side. We had some union people here before who had lots of concerns, and I still haven't heard. I heard that the first time around, I heard that the union's concerns had been addressed, and then the next time they didn't even speak. So we don't even know if their concerns were reached or satisfied. So I feel like it's really super one-sided, and I'm not comfortable and feel like it's going too fast. And I wish this was a town meeting vote, and I guess it will be the budget anyway. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Tara.
All right, next up is Charlie Kedlick. Charlie, you should be able to.
Yeah, I'm here. I assume you can hear me. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Well, I got to see this proposed agreement the first time, and DocuShare on the agenda for this meeting. It has not been available that I know of. I read it pretty carefully, and I have a rather different view of what is being proposed and what's been discussed. let's start with what has just been mentioned, and that's the 2 seats on the board of directors known as the board with a capital B, which, if you read this agreement, controls everything about this district, including the budget, personnel, purchasing, people, everything. Now, it's wonderful that the 2 town managers get along right now, but this is an agreement that could go on for another 25 years. And the town managers actually work for the select boards who don't always get along. I think there's only one word, naive, to say that, well, you know, we all get together, so we will find a compromise. No, it could be deadlocked. 2 votes controlling everything. I don't see that working. And if another town joins, then you get 2 against 1. What if Carlisle joins? You got Concord, Carlisle against Acton. That should work. There's a whole bunch of issues. I won't have time to go through all the details, so I picked the more important ones. It was said that we have control over the budget. No, we do not. If you read the agreement, the budget is set by the district's finance people, operating committee, approved by the district's board, and basically a bill is sent to the respective towns. And if the towns don't pay or don't include that amount, once it's submitted by the district, is not negotiable. It becomes part of the budget, part of the appropriations for the town that's submitted to town meeting, but the amount is not to be changed. And if it's not paid,
30 seconds remaining.
That won't be a problem. The district basically gets the money by the Board of Assessors adding it to the levy. There is a lot more, and I'll have to say one more thing. Our finance committee has not addressed this issue, so I don't see how you, the select board, can be voting on it without having at least the finance committee take a look at it.
Thank you, Charlie. Further public comment?
There are no other members of the public looking to comment.
Dean?
Actually, sorry, Mr. Chair. An additional hand went up for a repeat
Sure.
speak. Would you like to take it?
Yes, please.
Okay, I believe this is Tara. Please confirm who you are.
Yes. Yep, it's Tara from Acton, and I agree with Charlie. I feel like the FinCom should at least get a chance at this. This is a very significant agreement that is going to be very difficult and expensive to get out of, and I feel like that kind of thing should go through the FinCom. Thank you.
Dean?
Yeah, the comment I'd make regarding Charlie's considerations, and certainly I've always respected Charlie's opinion, and I'm guided by a lot of his thoughts. I'm not terribly concerned about this situation with the budget. I would be if John Mangiarotti and Stephen Crane were members of royalty and they were going to have those seats forever. But I think that if we had a situation where if either of those managers told their select boards, well, this is what the budget's going to be, and suck it up, and it doesn't matter if you don't like it, those guys are all subject to review every year, which brings us to our next piece of business later on tonight, Mr. Mangiarotti's review. The select boards in each town definitely have control because we're the folks that hire and fire the town managers. So, they might get away with bumping up the budget one year, but they probably would not get a chance to do it a second time.
Further questions from board members? A question I had, did John, did Was a similar presentation made to the Finance Committee over the last few months?
No.
Okay. We all comfortable with that? Stephen, in Concord, was there a presentation to the Finance Committee?
There was not, Mr. Chairman, and I think, and I was, if the board would indulge, I would happily touch on the comment about the two towns working together and the kind of the machinations of a two-person board. I think, as I mentioned in the previous meeting, the regional dispatch center that I was associated with in Western Mass also had a two-person board. And we did not vote at Finance Committee, and similarly, the issue of NAGOD kind of as a side comment came up in the Concord Select Board as well. And I think the issue of the water rights, conflict, if you will, or disagreement, to some extent proves the point that we didn't stop talking about a regional dispatch center or provide mutual aid or do a whole bunch of other things that communities do together every single day. Because we disagreed on one particular thing, and that's why I have no hesitation of being a part of a two-town, a regional dispatch. Our only job in all of this is to provide essential public safety services, and so, as you mentioned, it's a pretty bad look if we decide to quibble over one thing or another at the risk of being able to provide those services. So the same discussion happened in Concord, and I think the response is the same, that the towns work well together on multiple layers, not just one. Which is why I think it's not necessarily naive. I think it's more just there's complexity to these relationships that always isn't self-evident.
Was the vote in favor of the regional dispatch agreement by your select board unanimous?
It was not.
Was it 4-1?
Well, we had a motion that was made to just approve the agreement, and that was 4-1 after a pretty lengthy conversation. And then at the end of the meeting, a member of the public who was actually a select board elect noted that under the terms of the statutes, this specific language that has to be in the motion, and that was an oversight on our part for not putting that in the presentation in advance. And so because that was noted, we went back and voted, and then that vote was 3-2 in favor.
So it was 3-2 in favor. Okay.
John? I think it was 4-1 in concept, 3-2 in effect.
Okay.
So, and I would just want to note, if the board's going to consider that this is not, we didn't bring this forward as a cost-saving measure. This isn't a town manager idea about best practices in government. This is a public safety program that Chief Hart and Chief Burrows came to me and said, this is a good idea. We should do this. And Chief Burrows is here. I just want to give him a moment to reinforce the point of why we're doing this.
Sure. Chief?
Good evening. Thanks for the opportunity to speak. Yes, we had this idea at the beginning to put this thing together. Then we got the $30,000 to do the study. And we had Tom Kennedy come out, and after reading the study, I agree with a lot of his points. This is a great opportunity for these two communities to combine services and provide a better service to our residents.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Chief. Okay. Is there any further comments from board members? So then, do I have a motion to approve the Regional 911 Emergency Communications District Agreement?
So moved.
Thank you, Joan. John?
I was just going to actually show the actual motion that I asked you to consider taking to avoid what happened earlier tonight. Trying to bring it up here. There it is.
I move that the Acton Select Board accept the provisions of Section 18O to 18V, inclusive of Chapter 6A of the General Laws, providing for the establishment of a Regional 911 Emergency Communication District together with the towns of Acton and Concord, and the construction or siting, administration, operation, and maintenance of a regional 911 emergency communication center by district under the provisions of the proposed district agreement filed with the select board.
Is there a second to Joan's motion?
Second.
Second, Jim. Okay, is there any further discussion? Okay, so David, if you call the roll, please.
Mr. Snyder Grant,
Aye.
Ms. Gardner,
Aye.
Mr. Charter,
Aye.
Mr. Benson,
Aye.
and I say aye, so that's unanimous.
Okay, well, John and Stephen and the four chiefs, thank you very, very much for all the good work.
Thank you for your support, and thank you, Tom Kennedy and the Chiefs and Stephen. We'll see you soon. Thank you very much.
Hey, thank you.
Good evening. Okay, so did you want a 5-minute break before we go into the article? So okay, so we're at 9 o'clock now. Let's be back at 9:05. Okay, so what we are up to is the item 9, review annual town meeting articles and consider and recommendations for annual town meeting. I think we all have our assignments for the articles that we're responsible for and will make presentations on. So just to review the assignments, I will be taking Article 2, which is the town operating budget. Article 3, town capital infrastructure studies and improvements. That's actually two votes within the article, and it's David's article. There's items out of 4 items out of free cash, and then which require just a majority vote, and then 9 items out of the stabilization fund, which require a 2/3 vote. And then Article 4 is the town capital infrastructure studies and improvements. That's a borrowing. That's Dean's article. That requires a 2/3 vote. That includes the center traffic study, I think it's the actual project, the DPW, the Kelly's Corner lights and the 53 River Street Dam, plus $214,000 from the stabilization fund, which is to pay the first year's interest on those borrowings. Are we all okay so far? Then on Article 5, this is the wastewater treatment system rehabilitation. It's a borrowing. It requires a 2/3 vote. David, will you be making a presentation along with Woodward and Curran? Have you thought about doing that?
I think I'll be making that presentation, John, and not Woodward and Curran.
Okay. And I think what's important here is the debt service comes out of the sewer enterprise fund to be paid by the users. I think it's with a 2.5. I think it's a 2.5% increase in the sewer rates. I think that's what we were told.
Yes.
Okay. And then Article 6 is the Acton Boxborough Regional School District assessment. That's presented by the school district. It's a majority vote. The 7 is the Minuteman Regional School District assessment. I think it's the Superintendent Buquillin that handles that, and again, that's a majority vote. Article 8 is the land acquisition for Stonefield Farm. That was taken out of the CPC. David?
Yes, I think it's more properly just a conservation restriction.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm just wondering if the title of this article should be changed. It's not a land acquisition.
Yeah, it's technically, no, it's not a land acquisition, and that needs to be made clear.
Mr. Chair, is it okay if we bring in town council for this discussion?
Sure, yeah.
Matt Murphy, can you bring in town council, please?
Yeah, what it seems to say is on the article, it's land acquisition, Stonefield Farm, agriculture preservation restriction. Mina?
Town council should be coming up.
Oh, sorry, I missed the last few things that John said there while I was being virtually brought in for you. But this is an acquisition. I don't know why I'm turning colors. This is an acquisition of an agricultural preservation restriction, and that may include some items that are typically seen also in a conservation restriction, but this is acquiring a property interest. It is not acquiring a underlying fee interest, which is what you would normally see in a land acquisition. So you are right that we don't want to give the impression to folks that you are acquiring Stonefield Farm. You are acquiring a particular interest in Stonefield Farm.
Then what do you think the title should be? If the title says
Acquisition of agricultural preservation restriction.
So should we strike land acquisition and say Stonefield Farm agricultural preservation restriction?
Yes.
So just strike out land acquisition in the.
I think you can say acquisition of agricultural preservation restriction.
So just strike land.
So Stonefield Farm acquisition of agricultural. Just move the word acquisition to before agricultural. Okay, David?
That's fine. Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
And is David presenting that, or who's presenting that?
Here was the question. Should Andy McGee has been the driver on that.
Great.
And so should we ask Andy to do it?
If he's willing, he'll do the best job. Dean's currently listed, but
Dean, do you want to do it, or I'm sorry?
I'll be guided by whatever the board wants, but I think Andy is in a much better situation to do it.
So I'm also liaison to open space, and I've followed this since the beginning, so I could also do it. But there's no doubt that Andy would do a better job.
All right, so David, if you want to reach out to Andy, and ask him to, we'd love him to do it.
The other thing to note is it is listed as a standalone article right now. There has been discussion back and forth about whether to just leave it in the typical CPA article as it is just the CPA acquisition. I don't know whether it will remain as a standalone article or not. There's a few items that are being debated on that front.
Dean, first.
Yeah, the Community Preservation Committee met last week, and we took all of our votes with this as a separate article. So
you took a vote on this article.
Pardon me?
You took a vote on this article.
We took a vote on this article, and we took a vote on the other articles, the other acquisitions. So the expectation from CPC is that this is going to be separated, and I think Ray Jacoby, who's going to be doing the presentation for the rest of the CPC stuff, is not planning on getting involved in this. We were mentioning Andy throughout our entire meeting.
That can certainly be the case, whether or not it's part of the CPC article, the CPA article, or a standalone. But if it's the CPC's desire to have it be bifurcated in that way, that's fine.
That was the guidance from CPC.
David?
I was just wondering why this article requires a 2/3 vote.
Nina?
It's an acquisition of a property interest with an appropriation of funds.
Okay, so any appropriation that requires property interest requires 2/3?
Yes, if there's an appropriation related to it.
Okay, and all the rest of the CPA articles require just a majority vote?
I don't know all of them this year, but that was certainly one of the considerations when we were thinking about bifurcating this project, is that it has a different voting quantum.
Thank you.
If Andy is the presenter, Dean or David should be the selectman who stands up and says we support it.
Yeah, that'd be fine. Sure.
I can do that if you want, but or Dean. That's either way. Dean is currently assigned, but but either way is fine with me.
I defer to David because he's on the Open Space Committee and he's worked on this one.
Okay, so David, you'll speak for us.
Okay, thank you.
Jim.
On that question of, sort of introducing outside speakers, since I'm the liaison to the Minuteman, I'd love to be able to introduce that item. Also, it's Ed McQuillan's last year, so it seemed like it would be a moment to say a short but appreciative sentence.
Oh, of course.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll be prepared to do that.
Yeah, David.
But that one doesn't Pam usually make that presentation?
Oh, good point. That's right. It probably will. Sometimes it's Pam, but Dr. McQuillan has sometimes been there. So I'll ask.
It's usually an Acton resident unless we vote to allow.
Yeah.
Well, if I might, Mr. Chair.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt. I do need just to clarify. We need somebody that will move the article, and we need a select board member that is assigned to the article to make that recommendation, as Joan just said. So, for example, on Minuteman, it would be Mrs. Norris that moves the article.
Right.
And then when the moderator calls on the board to announce its recommendation, it could be Jim that makes that announcement.
We'll have Jim do it.
Okay.
Sure. Okay. And then Ray Jacoby, I take it, will be presenting the community preservation article. And Dean, you are the selectman assigned to the article.
Yeah.
Okay. Then we have the number 10 is the sidewalk acquisition for 74 and 78 Taylor Road. And that's to be, I noticed in the latest warrant draft, that is to be drafted. And the article to go.
So this is really something that we've been working on for a few years, and it's related to building a sidewalk on Taylor Road. Town Council's office has been working with council for the school district, and also we've been interacting with neighbors through Corey York, the Director of Public Works, to try to figure out exactly which mechanism we need to get this piece of land to finish the sidewalk. And Town Council, do you have an update on where we are today?
At this point, so this has become an incredibly complicated, what should be a very simple real estate issue has become very complicated. It was originally going to be structured as a land swap, giving the property owner some square footage on the side of their lot from the school in return for getting some square footage on the front by the sidewalk. For the town, it turns out actually legislatively that the school district cannot dispose of property, so that would take actually a special act of the legislature in order to do, which seemed quite complicated for some trying to fix this issue. So we have a few options on going forward, one of which being, a simple taking of a sidewalk easement as we do in other places in town. Before we can do that, we need an appraisal. And so we started that process and we should have the appraisal in hand shortly so we can discuss that with the property owner. That was not their preference, is my understanding. And as always, we would love to work with the property owner and have this be a voluntary matter. So we are likely, I'm not sure whether it will be resolved by town meeting floor, so we may draft an article that is flexible as far as what we can do to acquire this small strip of sidewalk.
So do we need a presentation on the article?
I think there would need to be an explanation about what it is, and for the most part, that is probably just a site plan or a plot plan showing where the property is that the town is looking to acquire. How much of a presentation or explanation about what it is, I can't say. I mean, I can't imagine if it is going to be handled like all of the other sidewalk easements, which is under the general umbrella. I think it's Article 34 this year. We may not need to take action on this article at all if it is going to be a separately acquired taking of the fee in the property. Then someone's going to probably have to explain that.
Well, what would be the best way to handle this?
I think one of us needs to be assigned, just if for no other reason, just to answer questions.
Okay.
If it's not on consent, someone's going to ask a question.
Okay. Who would have a good handle on this and could explain it?
I'm happy to give talking points and to folks as well.
All right. So David, you'll do with Nina's talking points?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
David, I'll keep you in the loop now of the fascinating situation of the sidewalk.
Thank you.
Okay. And then 11 is the amend the zoning bylaw to allow for drive-up windows. That's Dean's article and Dean's presentation. And then 12 is the release of the restriction at 127 Strawberry Hill Road. And that's Joan's article. I think, Joan, the key things here were we got crossed up in the September special meeting was, we just, this goes back to the 1980s restriction. What is it that the town is getting out of this? And what is it that the 127 Strawberry Hill homeowner is getting out of this? As I understand it, his property, he wants to divide his property, and then the person who buys that property gets to build a house closer to the road. So the larger property owner doesn't have a house less of a house in his line of sight. And then, what we get in return is that easement to repair the intersection and make it safe.
We get a long triangle along Pope Road to increase the sight line for cars on Strawberry Hill trying to look down Pope Road.
Yeah. And I think there were some questions that, because we just weren't quite clear on it. And, I think part of it is, things were a lot looser in the 1980s than they are now around, land use. I think it was Kim Caston Caston's had some good questions. She might be someone you might reach out to work this through. Okay, so
on that one, sorry to jump in here. The point should also be made, and Jenna, I'm happy to work with you on information on this as well, because it was driven by some legal analysis, is that those restrictions that the town is giving up are likely unenforceable. So it's highly likely to be unenforceable. So it's not as if it is more formalizing what would be the eventual legal conclusion were the homeowner to push the issue. So this is not as if it's a big give up for the town in return only for a small little, view easement. That's not the dynamic there.
So your sense is the restriction would likely be unenforceable?
Very much so.
Okay. All right,
so I think that's an important point that to be included in any presentation is this is really a housekeeping matter. This is not a big strategic decision to be made.
Yeah, there's not a condominium development going on the lower parcel. Okay, that's good. And then then the next two articles, 13 and 14, or Jim's articles to amend the general bylaws for the regulation of fossil fuel infrastructure and to the home rule petition of the fossil fuel infrastructure. When we come back to recommendations, Jim, if you could just go through your explanatory piece tonight, then the next 15, 16, and 18 seem to be late entries on the warrant. John?
So yes, if you look at 15, is that the first one?
Yeah.
So that would authorize the town to enter into pilot agreements with private solar developments. This is a requirement, and right now there is one project that we know of that's going to be proposed in the coming year, and if there are any others that come up, we think it would be an advantage to the sustainability goals of this community to not have a town meeting vote be required to enter into something that is typically very well supported by folks.
Yeah. Okay. So, would that be a companion article with 16?
Separate. Sorry.
Totally separate.
Yeah.
So this is related to WR Grace project, which, as you know, is building a large solar farm there with battery storage, and they are proposing to utilize a state program that allows for low-income electricity customers to have a discount. And there are still some mechanics that we're working through, and Select Board Member Snyder Grant has taken a big leadership role in initiating this whole thing. And I think we'll be making a presentation on it next week, or I guess in early June, with more details. But basically, this is just enabling our role in this process. And there's also Article 18 would be another component of our role in this process, because the way that we're considering structuring this arrangement is for the low-income electricity customers to be identified and to benefit through our existing aggregation program, which you all know is Acton Power Choice. And in order for us to meet the requirements of the state incentive programs, it has to be a longer-term agreement. And our current aggregation contract is 3 or 5 years. And so this town meeting article is asking for authorization to extend that out 20 years to allow us to build in this program to help benefit. Is it 200 to 300 low-income customers? Do we have an exact count at this point?
It's been brought down. I mean, it's however many low-income customers that we have in the aggregation program who are on the subsidized rates that Eversource offers. And the current count is about 248, 250.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so we'll have more meat to this article, obviously, before it's printed, and we'll continue to keep the board updated as this advances. But it's all happened in the last 6 weeks, or more recent than that, really.
Okay, so 15, 16, and 18 will be go articles for town meeting.
They should be ready. They should be ready. Yeah.
Jim, would you like to? Do those require a presentation?
Yeah, I think each will need a little presentation. I
All
can
right, so
imagine
would you
doing a.
handle those three? 15, 16, 18?
Sorry?
Would you handle 15, 16, and 18?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, sure. And 17 is the fleet agreement. That's for town vehicles?
Yes. So we're proposing through our capital plan to start a fleet replacement program, which will meet our goals of having a more efficient fleet and help us get there sooner, leveraging a lease arrangement and also using trade-ins from the leases to repurchase and turn over the entire fleet over 5 to 10 years. It's so this is just the article that we believe we'll need to accomplish that. And again, that's something being drafted right now. And there's actually, I think, another article related to this later in the warrant.
Okay, David?
John, if you'd like, I'd be happy to do this. There's actually slightly related to Article 3, which has some money for vehicles in this area. So
thank you, if you would. That'd be great. And then we had 19, 20, and 21 are 3 citizen petitions. 19 is the to eliminate the dog park. I think that was the $21,000 in funding. And then there were 2 articles related to the electing members of the planning board.
Dog park.
I'm the
dog park.
You are the dog park.
Her name is already listed in the warrant.
Okay, so are you going to give a presentation on it?
Oh, yes.
Against.
Yeah, the dog park committee is working on point-by-point response to the citizens petition.
Will you be delivering that argument, or?
Well, I have to coordinate with Tom, but I'm planning on taking that to the Acton TV.
Oh, okay. And then you would also be. Will you be making? Will we be making?
I'll work with Tom on it at town meeting.
Okay. Fair enough. So there'll be an opposing position, yeah, for the 2,000 dogs in town. David.
So, Joan, don't forget to ask the moderator for time for this, because only the proponent will get time by default. And so you need to ask the moderator for an equivalent amount of time.
Okay.
Yeah, I would let Joanne Berry, I would just drop her a note that you intend to make on behalf of the select board an opposing presentation that night. Then on the I think these were Tara's 2 articles on the planning board. I guess we could have a discussion during our recommendations as to whether we're for it or against it. And that would be it on the regular articles. I was going to be prepared on articles 28 through 34 if any of those are taken off of consent. Those cover the commuter lot and station maintenance and the various enterprise budgets. And I would just be ready with the appropriate town staffer to respond to questions that come up on that group of articles. Do you think, are there any other articles under consent that we should be ready on?
I think there may be questions on 25, or that there may be interest in 25, which is the...
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Should that have been a consent article, or should that have been a normal article? What do you think?
Well, if we're going to try to fit this in one night, I suggest we have everything on consent we can, or I don't think this is going to be hugely controversial. And if someone wants to hold it, they can hold it.
Okay. Okay, who would want to be prepared on it if it's taken off consent?
I can do that.
Okay, good. Okay, so let's do this second step and go through the articles for our recommendations. And when we get to the regulation of fossil fuel infrastructure, Jim has a 5-minute presentation to give us a full understanding of the complexities of that article. So, okay, so for Article 1, which is choosing town officers, is there any discussion on that?
Move to approve, recommend.
Okay, and is there a second?
Sure.
So I guess we have to call the roll for each of these.
Okay. One second. Okay, I'm ready.
Okay.
You want me to go ahead?
Yeah, please. So I guess call the roll.
Okay. Mr. Snyder Grant.
Aye.
Ms. Gardner.
Aye.
Mr. Charter.
Aye.
Mr. Benson.
Aye.
And I say aye, so Article 1 is unanimously recommended.
Okay. Article 2, this is the town operating budget.
Move to approve.
Move to approve. Is there a second?
So actually, it's really move to recommend. Is that
Move
right?
to recommend.
Okay, Joan? Move to
Yes. Move to recommend.
And is there a second?
Second.
Okay. David, if you call the roll, please.
Mr. Snyder Grant.
Aye.
Ms. Gardner.
Aye.
Mr. Charter.
Aye.
Mr. Benson.
Aye.
I say aye, so Article 2 is unanimously recommended.
Okay. Okay. Article 3. This is in two, I guess, two parts. Because it requires 2 votes. Would this be two? Nina, would this be 2 recommendations, or could we combine it into one? I think we're all behind it.
I think that's up to us, right?
Yeah, I think it depends on whether the position of the board that you want to make clear. If you want to make it clear that you expressly recommend both, then you can do it separately, or if there's a difference, certainly separately.
Okay. So why don't we move to recommend the full article, the free cash piece and the stabilization fund piece.
I'll move that.
Okay. Second.
Joan
Okay. Okay, David, just call the roll, please.
Mr. Snyder Grant.
Aye.
Ms. Gardner.
Aye.
Mr. Charter.
Aye.
Mr. Benson.
Aye.
I say aye, so we recommend Article 3 unanimously.
Okay. So to Article 4, town capital infrastructure studies and improvements, is there a motion to recommend?
So moved.
So moved and seconded. Okay, David?
Okay, Mr. Snyder Grant.
Aye.
Ms. Gardner.
Aye.
Mr. Charter.
Aye.
Mr. Benson.
Aye.
And I say aye, so Article 4 is unanimously recommended.
Okay. So Article 5 is the wastewater treatment system rehabilitation. Do we have a motion to recommend Article 5?
So moved.
So move Joan. Second? Second, David. David, you could call the roll, please.
Mr. Snyder Grant.
I'll abstain on this one.
So are you aware of what this is?
Yes.
The only reason I'm abstaining is because of I haven't heard from the Water Resources Advisory Council on their opinion on this. And I would prefer to have that recommendation, but they've just gotten restarted and reformed, so I haven't had a chance to look at this yet.
Okay.
Okay.
Ms. Gardner.
Aye.
Mr. Charter.
Aye.
Mr. Benson.
Aye.
And I also say aye. So that's recommended 4-0-1.
Okay. So 6 is the Acton Boxborough Regional School District Assessment. Do I have a motion to recommend Article 6?
So moved.
So moved by Joan. Second, Jim. Second, David.
Yep.
So if you'd call the roll, David.
Mr. Snyder Grant.
Aye.
Ms. Gardner.
Aye.
Mr. Charter.
Aye.
Mr. Benson.
Aye.
And I say aye. So the school district assessment is, the AV district assessment is recommended unanimously.
Okay. Article 7, the Minuteman Regional School District Assessment. Do I have a motion to recommend Article 7?
Move to recommend Article 7.
I'll second.
And Jim seconds. So David, if you call the roll, please.
Mr. Snyder Grant.
Aye.
Ms. Gardner.
Aye.
Mr. Charter.
Aye.
Mr. Benson.
Aye.
I also say aye. So that's unanimous.
Okay. So Article 8, which is the Stonefield Farm acquisition of an agricultural preservation restriction. Do I have a motion to recommend Article 8?
Move to recommend Article 8.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Jim. So David, call the roll, please.
Yes, Mr. Snyder Grant.
Aye.
Ms. Gardner.
Aye.
Mr. Charter.
Aye.
Mr. Benson.
Aye.
I say aye too. So Article 8 is recommended unanimously.
Okay. So we're on to the Article 9, which is the Community Preservation Program, direct appropriations from fund balances. So is it typical we vote the article as one, Dean?
Yes.
Okay, so do we have a motion to recommend Article 9?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, and seconded. So David, if you call the roll, please.
Mr. Snyder Grant.
Aye.
Ms. Gardner.
Aye.
Mr. Charter.
Aye.
Mr. Benson.
Aye.
And I say aye, so we recommend Article 9 unanimously.
Okay, do we have to hold on Article 10? That's the sidewalk acquisition.
Yes.
Okay. Then 11 is the amend the zoning bylaw for drive-up window facilities.
Second.
Second. Okay. David, if you call the roll, please.
Mr. Snyder Grant.
Aye.
Ms. Gardner.
Aye.
Mr. Charter.
Aye.
Mr. Benson.
Aye.
And I'm going to abstain, so it's 4 to
401.
yes, 401.
Okay, so Article 12 is the release of restriction at 127 Strawberry Hill Road. Do we have a motion to recommend the article?
So moved.
Second.
And David seconds. David, if you call the roll, please.
Mr. Snyder Grant.
Aye.
Ms. Gardner.
Aye.
Mr. Charter.
Aye.
Mr. Benson.
Aye.
And I also say aye, so that's unanimous.
Okay. So 13, Jim, if you'd like to take 5 minutes at this point and go over 13 and 14 with us.
Sure. I don't think it'll take 5 minutes, but let's just bring everyone up to date because there have been some changes since the last time we talked about this. This is the pair of articles, now 2 articles, that came out of it's part of what's come out of the Emergency Climate Declaration from the fall town meeting. So the town's expressed an interest in reducing climate change emissions as quickly as possible with a target date of 2030, and depending on appropriate state and federal support. So this particular move, which is a move to require that new construction and major rehab not have fossil fuel piping, it comes in 2 parts. Well, first of all, the motivation. 40% or more of our greenhouse gas emissions in town are from buildings, so it's an important target to hit. At the same time, new construction is the right place to start because once you have a building constructed with fossil fuel pipes, it tends to stay that way for a few decades, and we don't have a few decades. So let's start with the new buildings, and then to address older buildings is going to require a lot of state and federal support because some of those moves are difficult. Each house is different. So we're starting there. This is the purpose of these articles is really twofold. First of all, to get a conversation going about electrification of buildings and the ability to have wonderful commercial and residential buildings that don't use fossil fuels. So there's an educational component. And the other part of it is that there are a number of towns who are making this same set of articles. Lexington and Arlington have already passed this, as has Brookline. Other towns, including Newton and Concord, are preparing to have similar articles. And the notion here is to create enough of a groundswell for the legislature to approve. Because here's the thing. Brookline had a similar bylaw, and the Attorney General said, no, you can't do that on your own. You're trying to bypass natural gas regulation and building codes, which are regulated at the state level. So Brookline and the other towns came back and said, okay, let's do this via a home rule petition. That is, let us ask the legislature for permission to have this bylaw to regulate fossil fuel infrastructure. So that's why we have 2 articles. One is a new bylaw, and the other is the home rule petition that says, please let us do this. The bylaw itself says it doesn't come into effect unless there is legislation, and the home rule petition says we would like to regulate fossil fuel infrastructure along the lines of this bylaw. The analysis from our state legislature is that the legislature, at least in the next 2 years, is actually unlikely to pass a specific piece of legislation for Acton that will allow us to do this. So really, what we're after is to create that sense of pressure to the state legislature to say more and more towns want to be able to do this. Please do this on a state basis. So allow towns to opt in to having fossil fuel-free construction. The details of the article, the bylaw, have not changed much. A lot of the work with town council has been about just restructuring the parts of it, but not changing the impact. We still have a waiver process where the building commissioner, when they're issuing building permits, can say, obviously they can say initially, no, look, you have fossil fuel infrastructure coming in here, you can't do this. But there's a waiver process. So applicants can demonstrate that their need to use fossil fuel is technologically necessary or financially necessary to make their project feasible. The building commissioner, if the building commissioner turns down that waiver request, that can be appealed to the select board. The other piece that's in there that's gotten more clarity is that the select board is the board that we will be the ones to create the detailed regulations. So for example, when I say technically infeasible or financially infeasible, what does that mean? We would get to define what that means before this came into effect. The earliest this would possibly come into effect would be December 2022, although given the pace of the legislature, even that seems optimistic. What else can I say here? We've had discussions with a variety of boards and staff. We've talked with the planning director, the town engineer, the building commissioner, and we've met and talked with the planning board, the design review board, the economic development committee, and the green advisory board. All have had helpful comments. The most recent meeting, which I think was probably the most interesting one in terms of the concerns of the select board, was with the EDC. They did not take a formal vote in support or for or against it. So you will need to talk to them. They may end up taking a vote. I would say they were split. There were some people that were clearly enthusiastic, some people that were clearly skeptical, and some people that had technical questions. Among the technical questions and the concerns were in two aspects. How does this affect new commercial businesses that would like to come to Acton, particularly restaurants? Commercial restaurants are some of the most energy intensive commercial operations around. They're right up at the top of the list. They're obviously generating a lot of heat in order to get all that cooking done. So there's a few points that I made in response to that question. The first one is that the most likely solution here, if this ever moves forward, is that it would be a statewide move that towns could opt into. So we would not have a disadvantage compared to our neighboring towns, many of whom would also opt in to this system. The other thing is that this only is about new buildings and major rehab. Most of our commercial restaurants are in buildings with other businesses, so in strip malls and blocks, and the likelihood that 75%, which is the required percentage for commercial rehab to be require no fossil fuel infrastructure, is unlikely. There's not going to be that many large malls who are deciding to rebuild more than 75% of themselves. There are some standalone restaurants that would then be affected by this if they did rebuild. I talked to a commercial real estate person who was recommended to me by Selby, and what he said was, well, with chain restaurants, what they need is they have a playbook that has, here's the equipment you're going to use, here's how you're going to train people, here's exactly how you cook things. And the major chains, such as McDonald's and Wendy's, your very large national chains, already have electric playbooks, because there are towns, for example, in California that have already banned natural gas. So they know perfectly well how to do fine cooking with electricity. There's an increasing number of chefs who are in favor of using induction stovetops. They find a greater level of control, and it's more programmable in the case of a restaurant. I think that's the main thing. The other aspect people were concerned about is, how does this affect the building trades? So we had a great conversation with who's the amazing builder in West Acton who does development?
Matthias. Matthias.
Yeah, no, not Matthias. The architect and builder who's behind. Thought Forms. Okay, Thought Forms Corporation. So he's been doing electric construction for a while. He agreed with the research we had done, with the research we had found from RMI and from the other towns, Arlington and Lexington, that electric construction is cheaper, less expensive, because you don't have to pay for the gas coming in, and you don't have to have dual systems. Like electricity for AC and natural gas for heating. You have a single system for heating and cooling. The other thing we learned was that the sales values of these all-electric, especially residential, which has been more studied, have a premium, so they sell for more money. So we're not going to make it harder for any builders. Some builders will have to retrain. Some builders will have to learn new things. We think that's an advantage, because this is the way construction is headed. So we will be an incubation site for the future of building. I'm sure I've hit my 5 minutes, so I'll be quiet.
Any questions for Jim? Okay, so do I have a motion to recommend Article 13?
So moved.
So David, second, Joan. David, call the roll, please.
Mr. Snyder Grant,
Aye.
Ms. Gardner,
Aye.
Mr. Charter,
I'll abstain on this one.
after I had drawn the check mark.
You can never anticipate what the select board will do.
Okay, Mr. Benson,
Aye.
and I say aye. And so that's 401.
Okay. So then Article 14, which is the home rule petition, building with clean energy to regulate fossil fuel infrastructure. Is there a motion to recommend Article
Sure.
14?
I'll move to recommend.
Okay. And is there a second, Joan?
Second.
Second. David, if you call the roll, please.
Could I just ask a question on this one?
Sure.
And the difference between this one and the last one is there's just two different approaches? Or are they?
No. One is the first one. The one we just voted on is the actual bylaw. So it's got it's got a chapter. It goes into our bylaws. The second, this one here is the home rule petition that says that directs the select board to ask the state legislature, please let us do this.
Got it.
So, and it doesn't have any of the details.
Got it. Okay, I can go ahead then.
Yeah, please.
Okay, great. Mr. Snyder Grant,
Aye.
Ms. Gardner,
Aye.
Mr. Charter,
Abstain.
Mr. Benson,
Aye.
and I also say aye. So that's 401.
Okay. Article 15, authorized payment in lieu of taxes agreements for solar facilities. Is there a motion to recommend Article 15?
I'll move to recommend.
Thank you, Joan. And Joan seconds. So David, if you'd please call the roll.
And Mr. Snyder Grant,
Aye.
Ms. Gardner,
Aye. Aye.
Mr. Charter,
Aye.
Mr. Benson,
Aye.
and I also say aye. So that's unanimous.
Okay. So Article 16, to authorize solar contract low-income community shared solar facility. Is there a motion to recommend Article 16?
I'll move to recommend.
Jim?
Second.
And Joan seconds. David, if you call the roll, please.
Mr. Snyder Grant,
Aye.
Ms. Gardner,
Aye.
Mr. Charter,
Aye.
Mr. Benson,
Aye.
and I also say aye. So that's unanimous.
Okay, so the next two, 17 and 18, are coming. So we need to see those articles first. This would be the non-binding resolution on dog park funding and relocation. Do I have a motion to not recommend the article?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, second. Okay. So, David, if you call the roll, please.
Okay, Mr. Snyder Grant,
Aye.
Ms. Gardner,
Aye.
Mr. Charter,
Aye.
Mr. Benson,
Aye.
and I also say aye.
Okay. Then 20 is, it requires a 2/3 vote. It's to amend the town charter to elect planning board members. Do we want to have any discussion on this? Because that is a big change.
Sure, I'd love to have a discussion.
Sure. Why don't you lead off?
So I think there may be some issues with the planning board, but I don't mostly in my mind that they are not actually planning. They are interested mostly, it seems, in approving or not approving permits, but they have they have a charter that includes, planning is suggested by the name of the board. But I don't think that's solved by electing the planning board. I think that's more a matter of, they've been relatively neglected. They've not had enough members. The planning department has been low in membership, has been low in employees for a while. I just think they need to get charged up again. And I think the way to do that is not to say, oh, by the way, to serve on the planning board, you not only have to serve on the planning board, but you have to run a campaign. That doesn't seem to me to solve the issue.
Dean?
Yeah, I'll just, I'll agree with Jim on that 100%. And I think the other issue I have is that, planning staff up until very recently was very stable. Roland was a town planner for well over 30 years, I think. And his personality certainly put a stamp on the town. And some people don't like that. I think now that we've got some movement there, we've got a new town planner and there's a search for additional planning staff. I think we give them a little chance to work with the planner and with the planning department, planning board, I should say. And we can always reconsider this next year, but at this point, I think it's really premature.
Any further comments from? Yeah, I would just like to echo the sentiments of Jim and Dean. And I always saw the planning board as a quasi judicial body where they had to put on judges' hats and interpret the bylaw, not make the bylaw, but do what the bylaw requires them to do, even if they don't like the result that it brings on. And I would not like to see that group politicized. Growing up in my youth years in New York State, where they would elect judges out of political clubhouses, you get a much better quality of judges, that are appointed by good governors and good judicial nominating committees. So, which is sort of what we're supposed to be doing, and we generally do that. So, I would oppose the article.
I move to not approve.
No, not recommend.
Not recommend.
Yeah.
Second that.
Okay, second that. David, call the roll.
Mr. Snyder Grant?
Aye.
Ms. Gardner?
Aye.
Mr. Charter?
Aye.
Mr. Benson?
Aye.
I also say aye, so we unanimously don't recommend this article.
Should we make a statement at the meeting that we don't recommend for these reasons?
I think that makes sense.
I mean, typically that is read from, it could be a 1-minute statement that's sort of read from the.
Yeah, for the person we don't have a person assigned to this, because usually the person telling the town meeting of our recommendation would also, say the board's thoughts were X, Y, and Z.
Mm-hmm.
So, I think whoever is assigned to this should make a little statement.
Okay. Who would like to do that?
I'm willing.
All right, sure. Okay.
What's the is there an OML appropriate way for me to verify that what I'm writing kind of reflects the sense of the board? Can I have a few minutes at some future meeting to say here's what I'm thinking?
Well, there's only one more meeting.
Okay. Well, I'll write it before the 7th if that's
yeah.
okay.
I mean, it's generally like a 1-minute statement.
I'll keep it short.
As to why we're opposed to it. Then 21 is a non-binding resolution electing planning board members. I'm not sure why there's a need for a second.
This has a smaller margin of vote needed, so I think it was a fallback.
Oh, is that the idea? Okay, that's it. Okay, So is there, consistent with 20, is there a motion not to recommend the article?
Move not to recommend.
Okay, and there a second?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay. Okay, so David, if you call the roll, please.
Mr. Snyder Grant,
Aye.
Ms. Gardner,
Aye.
Mr. Charter,
Aye.
Mr. Benson,
Aye.
and I also say aye, so that's unanimously not recommended.
Okay. So now we're into the consent articles.
Point of order, Sean?
Yeah.
I was just wondering if you might want to call these like a consent calendar and see if any of us wants to hold any of them, and otherwise we just vote them as a block.
Okay, it does, yeah, and then we could put it on each page that we recommend. Okay, but just do it all as a block. So Article 22, which is amend the general bylaws terminology of the select board. Article 23 is amend general bylaws, the department revolving funds. There have to be some numbers to fill in here. Mark?
Yes, if I may, the numbers would go in Article 34, the revolving fund budget large article. This bylaw, this would be simply a amendment to the bylaws to create the fund. The budget would actually show up later in Article 34.
Okay. Okay, so Article 23. 24, the vehicle trade-in proceeds, that still needs to be drafted. So we have to hold on that.
I guess we could do all these later because we have a couple others, so we could just do the ones that are not, we could just hold on all of these till June 7th.
No, the problem we have is the warrant needs to be posted by 5:30 on June 7th. That's 14 days before.
Sorry.
And then it's gotta go to the printer several days prior. Mark, what will be the date you have to get this to the printer?
It's on June 7th. So, unless the board were to call a special meeting in advance the week before, I think we need them tonight.
No, I'm sorry, I'll take it back.
So you'd need recommendations tonight, unless
Yes,
it's a special meeting.
That's correct.
Because there were several articles, 10, 17, and 18, that are still in the works.
Anything that's left hanging would be deferred.
Just make the recommendation deferred.
Right, and then your recommendation will be made verbally at the meeting.
Okay. So then we'll circle back at the end for 10, 17, and 18 and say deferred. Okay. So the same thing with 24.
That would be fine.
Um, 25, that's 26 Carlisle Road. 26 is a budget transfer, move to take no action. 27, authorized collective bargaining agreement. 28 is the commuter lot and station maintenance. 29 is the septic disposal enterprise fund. 30 is the transfer station and recycling enterprise budget. 31 is the sewer enterprise budget. Is this article, Mark, all set to go, or because there's some yellow lines through numbers?
I think that we still need to review this internally.
Oh, okay, so that would be another one for 30, 31. Excuse me for a second. One of 24. Okay, then and then there's the ambulance enterprise budget. That looks good. It's 32, 33, transportation enterprise fund, 34 are the revolving funds. There seems to be a hold on the public shade trees. So that should be a recommendation deferred on 34, Mark?
Well, there'll be a budget that is set for FY22, which we don't know yet. So it's up to the board.
So, so could we recommend Article 34, even though there's a number to be filled in on one of the items?
Yes.
All right, let's do that. Okay, 34. 35, hear and accept reports. 37, the Highway Reimbursement Program, Chapter 90. 39, gifts and grants. 40, federal and state reimbursement aid. 42, sale of foreclosed properties. So I guess the only ones here would be
I think I have it, John, if you want me to make a motion.
Yeah, if it's 20, yeah, okay, go ahead.
I move that we recommend Articles 22, 23, 25 through 30 inclusive, and 32 through 42 inclusive.
That's for, yeah.
Second.
Okay, David, if you call the roll, please.
Mr. Snyder Grant?
Aye.
Ms. Gardner?
Aye.
Mr. Charter?
Aye.
Mr. Benson?
Aye.
I also say aye.
And then we would defer recommendations on Articles 10, 17, 18, 24, and 31. Would that be right, David?
Yes, I think that's right. I think we don't have to make a motion on that. That's just what Mark would do.
Okay. So the warrant, Mark, would reflect recommendation deferred on those 5 items.
Yeah, so anywhere there's a lack of a clear recommendation or against would be deferred.
Okay, so that covers all of that. Okay, so it sounds like we're good. Has everyone signed up with Mark Ducci to do their tape presentations to be run?
No, I haven't.
No, not yet.
Okay, he's there was an email John forwarded to us on May 17th at 4:05 p.m., which was his exchange with Mark, and Mark had given 3 dates. Wednesday, June 2nd, anytime from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m., Thursday, June 3rd from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m., and Monday, June 7th from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. So just drop Mark, just, go to that email and then just write Mark a note. So that's great. Okay, so that concludes that item. And then our final item before the executive session is John's, the town manager's performance evaluation. So, just for those people in the audience, and Marianne's joining us. If we could put Marianne in now. We were each given a ratings sheet, and that covered approximately 15 categories, and we can vote from a rating of 2 for improvement needed, good is 3 points, very good is 4 points, outstanding is 5 points. The categories were decision-making, interaction, motivates others, identifies and resolves problems, planning, financial and budgetary oversight, asset management, management effectiveness, employee relations, administration, innovation and change, knowledge, organizational relationships, leadership qualities, and organization. Going through all of those categories on decision making, John got a 4.80. In interaction, he got a 4.60. Motivates others a 4.50. Identifies and resolves problems 5.0. Planning 4.8. Financial and budgetary oversight 4.8. Asset management 4.8. Management effectiveness 4.33. Employee relations 4.67. Administration 5.0, innovation and change 4.8, knowledge 4.6, organizational relationships 4.6, leadership qualities 5.0, organization 4.80, with an overall performance rating of 4.70. A job really well done, John. Thank you. So are there any comments from board members? Jim?
Well, I guess we can talk about this again when we set goals, but it was very difficult for me to disentangle John's performance from performance of staff. And it's one of the reasons I'm looking for some way of getting anonymous assessments from staff that report to John for future reviews. That my experience suggests that people who are really good at managing their managers, and John is a master at that, because he serves us really well. I mean, he takes our goals incredibly seriously and makes them happen. People that are really good at managing up sometimes have an issue with managing down. Not everyone, but it can be a tricky balance. And I wish we had a way of assessing that. So some of my so there's a lot I really couldn't fill in or answer because of that.
Yeah, you and I narrowed it down this year to about 3 where I put NA not applicable, because we just weren't, I just felt like we just weren't in a position to judge how well John motivates others, or his management effectiveness, or employee relationships, because, personally, I, would not ask staff, well, how do you find John manages relationships, or what's his management effectiveness? I just had no way to, to note that. David?
Yes. So, I've found John to be efficient, proactive, good at communication, and I do find that he works well with staff, and I think I'm exposed to that a reasonable amount. I see him encouraging staff to step up and do things. I see John doing things like having his all staff meetings and other things. So I think he allows staff to shine and steps back when it's kind of the staff's responsibility. A department director to step forward. So I find that excellent. So I think I see that with some reasonable frequency. So anyway, I say thumbs up.
Okay.
Dean?
Yeah, just to further what David has said, it's really tough with last year with us really being isolated, not being able to see staff. But the occasions when we have, I think you can get a certain feel. And when we interact, whether it's myself talking with Christian, for instance, with CPC, and I certainly want to respect all of the limits of chain of command and not start questioning people, but you just get a feel if people are happy with doing their jobs. And my own experience in years past was one of the main reasons you're not happy with doing your job is when you're unhappy with your boss. And I just, in the limited number of interactions I've been able to have, going to meetings and, meet and greets and that kind of stuff, I just get a good feeling from the help. They all seem pretty happy. And, a lot of them know me, so they know they don't need to butter me up. So I just want to back up and second what David has said is, it seems like the staff seems to be pretty happy. So that reflects well on the manager.
Yeah, I've been a selectman 14 years now, and over quite a variety of time periods and various town managers. And I must say, in my experience, we've had some good town managers and we've had some not so good town managers. And I think John has performed 110% being the town manager. But on top of town manager, he's had to deal with all COVID issues this year. And I think from handles on the door strips and plastic shields and closing town hall, and we've had elections during this period. And I mean, it's just been outstanding. The work he's put into dealing with this COVID, in addition to managing normal town government. So I think he's done an outstanding job this year.
Yeah, I would echo those sentiments that, for the last 15 months, John's performance through COVID has been, nothing, short of spectacular. And, I've said this a number of times that my first vote as a selectman, I think it was on April 8th of 2018, was offering the town manager's job to, John, and I certainly stand by that. And
yeah, we made it.
That was unanimous vote. What was really interesting was, the runner-up in that final round was Stephen Crane. So they both landed pretty well. David.
I'd just like to bring up a detail that doesn't reflect at all on John, but rather reflects on his contract, which I know we're not voting on here, but the wording of the contract says that we'll have goals prepared by the end of the fiscal year. And so come July 1st, I don't want to be in breach of contract. So
you won't be sued, don't worry.
Right, so I'm wondering, whether we need to adjust the wording of that contract to say in any non-pandemic year we'll have the goals done by the beginning of the fiscal year, or whether that's just not important, or it just I just noticed that reading through the contract. So
yeah, I think we're safe. I don't.
Well, okay, yeah. If it doesn't bother John, it doesn't bother the town council, then I guess we're good. But
okay, John, do you have any comments for us?
Sure. Yeah, thank you. That issue does not bother me, but I do really appreciate all of the feedback. I had a chance to review the comments that you provided in written form, and I really appreciate the constructive and the very thoughtful feedback that you provided me. It's an honor to serve as the town manager for this community, and I think that it's nice to be recognized for the work I've done here. But I think that Select Board Member Snyder Grant has it that there's something special here with the staff that we have. We're a very professional organization, that we have the highly trained professionals at every part of the whole operation, and over the last 15 months, I think you saw a lot of people shine and show what they do for this community. And it was really fun for me to have a facilitating role to work with all these professionals and work with this board and helping with your direction throughout this last year. And I look forward to continuing to do that in a non-pandemic year next year. And I just want to thank you, each five of you, for your support and for your feedback.
Thank you, John. Further comments? Okay. Jim.
Just a final thought. So, where I'm torn is, on the one hand, John is doing an amazing job. It's clear, from what we've heard. And on the other hand, he's a new town manager. He deserves a path to continue to grow and improve and, expand his skills. And I want to make sure that, however we do this evaluation process and however we work together going forward, that we make sure that, we provide that opportunity. Because I think one thing I've seen from you, John, is that you really like taking on new challenges. You really like, going into areas that you don't necessarily know a lot about, but then learning a whole bunch. Trusting your professionals and then doing a good job. So I just want to make sure that in the rush to acclaim your really good, excellent qualities as town manager, that we don't lose track of any subtle ways that we can help you improve even more, or give you exciting challenges. As the case may be. Because I want to keep you around here for a long time.
David.
Although I suspect he had a few challenges this past year. And also, I just will say to his credit, he steps up to volunteer for things like, being part of a Mass Municipal Association forum, directing the forum, or working with regional communities on collaborating to see if we can set up a mass vaccination site, all sorts of things like that, which are new. So, again, kudos to doing that.
Okay. All right. Well, well done. And let's keep it going. Okay, so before we go into the executive session, we have our consent items. David, you got. We're not going forward on consent item 11.
That's right.
So we'll just ask for approval. I'll just read 12 through 14 then. Would that be correct?
Yes.
Okay. So consent item 12, accept Kelly's Corner right-of-way acquisition, 300 Main Street, 13, accept gift council on aging for $25 from Carol Ann Urum towards the council on aging gift fund. 14, one-day alcoholic beverage license, Christopher Hardy, Narrow Park, July 11, 2021. So do I have a motion to accept consent items 12 through 14 inclusive? Joan, is there a second? Second, David. David, if you call the roll, please.
Mr. Snyder Grant,
Aye.
Ms. Gardner,
Aye.
Mr. Charter,
Aye.
Mr. Benson,
Aye.
and I also say aye.
Okay, good. So there will be a need for an executive session to discuss strategy sessions in preparation for negotiations with non-union personnel, in this case, the town manager, under purpose 2. So as chair, I'll entertain a motion to enter executive session to discuss strategy sessions and preparations with non-union personnel, the town manager in this case, under purpose 2. Someone motion. So Joan, is there a second? Second, Dean. Before the roll call to enter executive session, let me declare that in the executive session, the board will discuss strategy sessions and preparations with non-union personnel, in this case, the town manager, under purpose 2. David, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Snyder Grant,
Aye.
Ms. Gardner,
Aye.
Mr. Charter,
Aye.
Mr. Benson,
Aye.
and I also say aye.
Okay, so we are now we're in executive session. At the conclusion of the executive session, the board will reconvene in open session only to adjourn.